So welcome to the August 11th, 2020 school board meeting of the Shorewood School District. I want to call this meeting to order. First up is to adopt the agenda. I'll take a motion.
So moved. Pablo.
And a second.
I'll second.
Okay. Any changes or things people would like to table?
Or maybe, do you want to just briefly explain kind of how we change around the agenda from the usual order?
Yeah, sure. So we have on the agenda all of the items that required board action first. So we'll go through superintendent's action agenda item, consent, and then board action and consent, and then move on to district reports. The goal is to work towards finalizing everything in the meeting by 10 o'clock. So we'll have an opportunity to check in around 9:45 to where we are. Public comments are still in the same places, so still have opportunities for that as well. Thanks, Emily. So, okay, I have a first and a second. I'll take a roll call vote. All in favor? Emily?
Aye.
Hillary? Hillary, aye. Pablo?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
And aye from myself. Brian, can you remind us of our overarching results?
Yes, our overarching results are students are leaders who challenge themselves to grow and achieve academically, pursue their passions, navigate change, learn continuously, and contribute to the common good.
Great. And awards and recognitions tonight?
Yeah, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge and congratulate the SHS senior class of 2020 who had their in-person graduation on Sunday, August 2nd. So happy to see them able to gather together and receive the recognition they deserve for their leadership and collective accomplishments, both academically and in their co-curricular activities throughout their time here spent in the district. So we wish all of them luck on their future endeavors and can't wait to see the great things that they do. I also want to have a specific shout out in addition to the great work that many of the kids did is to Principal Kenny and his staff who did a lot of great work for basically the whole summer to make that happen for our students. So thank you to all the staff who did that specifically. So, and that concludes our awards and recognitions for tonight.
Great, thank you. All right, so now is our first opportunity for public comment. I'm gonna ask Mickey to provide the directions for that.
All right, for those people that are interested in commenting, please press *6 to unmute yourself and unmute on your phone. We have one phone person calling in, number 65, last two digits, 65. Last two digits on your phone number if you're number 65. Do you have a question or a comment? All right, that's the only one at this time. I'm gonna throw it back to you, Peru.
Thanks, Mickey. I always feel like as soon as I start speaking, things kind of start working out, so I'm just gonna wait one more second. Okay, there's more opportunities for public comment later if people are interested in. So, all right, so up first is I will take a motion to approve the extended hours for Huffman Facility Development, owner's rep for referendum projects.
Pablo, so moved.
Thank you. And a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Emily. All right, so Brian provided us a summary of an executive summary of this approval of extended hours, and then Mike Huffman is with us tonight, so I'm going to turn it over to you two. Oh, Brian, you're muted.
Got it. Sorry about that. So if you remember when we had brought Mike and his crew on earlier in the year, and they've been doing some fantastic work for us. So what we had started with for hours with the absence now of a full-time business manager to be able to work through a lot of the project work. A lot more hours have been kind of demanded of Mike and his crew to be able to help with that support. And so originally we had set a level of hours that right now we need to increase a bit to be able to have Carl Kramer, who is our on-site representative, from 2 to 3 days, and then to up Mike's support for us, looking at approximately 5 hours a week to 15 hours a week. So that mirrors what we think we need from a support standpoint for Mike. So with that, I'd like to just turn it over to Mike just to talk a little bit about kind of some things that they've been working on, and maybe a little bit more about that increase also. So Mike.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Sorry, my computer microphone seems to have just decided to fail. So I'm on the phone. And I was dialing, so I didn't hear quite what you said. You're looking for our contractual change, is that correct?
Yeah, contractual change, and then just an idea, Mike, of just scope of the work and kind of a monthly update, if you will.
Great. Yep, absolutely. So really, we've been putting in. So we presented a proposal. It got scaled back at the time we got signed up. Shortly thereafter, you lost a business manager. And our engagement level has been significantly more than what we had proposed, and that's on my side. And it does seem like having more on-site presence with Carl Kramer solving some of the day-to-day puzzles in conjunction with Tony, the project could benefit from. So that's really what we're asking, is that we get back to what we originally proposed before it was scaled back at the time that we actually got signed up. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So I do want to give you an update, and I apologize. I was on vacation last week and I didn't get a report submitted for your board packet. But what I'd like to focus on today is well, let me give you a quick construction status, and then I'd like to focus on some of the cost issues that we've been managing, and also talk to you about upcoming cost issues and where the board would engage, or where we would just be giving updates. So by way of a quick update on the construction progress, of course, Lake Bluff and Atwood, and then Atwood EEC have been progressing, as well as the high school. And the high school is specifically focused on the second floor. And then the underground work for the addition at the high school has occurred. We've come across a great number of surprises. At Atwater, our surprises have been quite a bit out on the site. We've had some collapsed storm sewer lines that we're still investigating and looking at how we can make repairs while we're there, but not impede the traffic flow to that building. Structural aspects of the entryways at both Atwater and Lake Bluff have proven to be quite challenging and quite different from the expectations as anticipated in the architectural drawings. So specifically at Atwater, there has been a storm sewer manhole that was in the location of our handicap ramp. And so that had to come out, get moved, and you can't just pick up a storm sewer manhole structure and move it. It was quite old and decrepit, so we got a new structure and relocated that. That was an item that wasn't anticipated in the design process. And then over at Lake Bluff, we have a very interesting condition where the stone steps lead up to the main entry. It was anticipated that those stone steps were over an earth portion of the property, and in fact, there was a jut out of the basement structure, so those stone steps were built over a concrete structural slab. So that was a much different condition than the design documents anticipated. So there was a stop and react issue there. Over at the high school, the surprise really has been that we discovered a oil tank, a heating oil tank, which really was not very far below the asphalt surface. They really just started scratching the surface to dig for footings and foundation, and discovered this concrete tank. So we had to stop there, bring in a specialist that looks at contaminated soil potential, and also to do tank removal. So we're engaging a specialty contractor to remove that piece, and Myron has kind of redirected their efforts around that until that gets extracted. I think other construction activities, we've really gotten out of the utility tie-ins in the streets. So some of the traffic congestion that was created over at Lake Bluff is now eliminated, and would be ready for you to have more traffic on those streets. Any questions on the physical construction update before I get into some of the cost issues?
Mike, could you just clarify the sort of surprises? Were those things that were different in the old drawings, or were they differences in what EUA had given you that was like a new one? I just was wondering what you were relying on.
Yeah.
What Myron was relying on, rather.
Sure. Yeah. So at the high school, complete surprise. Nobody knew that concrete tank was there, and it's a sizable one. I suspect that it was in use for only 10 or 15 years after the original construction of the building, before the powerhouse was constructed. So it just never carried through on any documentation. Over at Atwater, the manhole structure for stormwater, I'm not sure why that didn't show up in the survey work as to being right in the location of the ramp. I don't know if there was a disconnect between that actually showing on the survey in the right location and the development of the ramp plans, but it was a surprise because it wasn't documented on the plans. And then finally, over at Lake Bluff, I don't know if it was a deficiency in the original plans that the architects might have worked off of, or if they even had them. I wasn't around in the design process. Sometimes late 1800s architectural drawings were very, very vague, and you'd have to do a physical survey, and it's difficult when you're in the basement to relate that to how it lines up with the structure above. So I certainly can't fault the architects for that, but it definitely was a different condition than expected. All right. So, yep, go ahead.
Sorry, I wanted to follow up on a question that Emily just asked about. On the surprise at Atwater, you said you weren't sure why that didn't show up on the survey. I had two questions. One was, is that something that the the team needs to look into to see why that didn't happen? Because I'm presuming, did that cost us any extra based on that not happening? I guess is what I'm getting at.
Well, so we'd have to define costing extra. So had it shown up on the survey, they would have instructed the bidders to move it because it is definitely in conflict with really our only opportunity to put a handicap ramp. And yes, it did cost us. That cost us about $17,000 to.
Okay. I was going to ask,
that
would there have been another design? Oh, sorry. I thought you were done. I was going to ask, the second question was going to be, had it been in the original survey, would it have changed the way you had designed the ramp? And it sounds like not. It just would have been removed anyway.
No, I don't think it would have changed it. I think the only thing where it may have been more economical is, of course, that price would have been received under the competitive bidding process, whereas
sure.
when you discover it in the construction phase, we get a price from them, we evaluate it. Is it as sharp as the bidding process? No.
Okay.
Mike, Pablo here.
Yeah.
I have a question about generally around construction. Driving around the village and seeing all the advances that the team's making is incredible. I'm wondering how the outreach has been, or if it hasn't, or what kind of outreach we've been doing to our neighbors to let them know of noise, kind of that good neighbor policy that Emily brought up actually years ago, to make sure that the folks around the perimeter of our schools know what's going on.
Yeah, so some time ago we discussed what our opportunities were to get some detailed information out to the immediate neighbors, to certainly Atwater and Lake Bluff. And so we did develop a project flyer that included a picture, a name, and a contact number for the main project superintendent for Myron, and directed towards the school district's website for construction updates. And it kind of vaguely touched on what people could expect in terms of hours of construction. That's been the outreach to the immediate neighbors. We haven't received any calls with questions about that. So I would say that's been the extent of it, well, in addition to the school district website.
So those flyers have been sent out to the neighbors?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. So this is really our first opportunity. I've updated you in the past where we sat with costs from an overall big picture standpoint. And that big picture is a good positive picture. As you know, we did fairly well with our bidding process. So now we get into it, and we, of course, with $65 million of virtually entirely renovation, but for a small addition at the high school administration building, there's lots of opportunity for us to discover things along the way. I've mentioned a few of them here already. So I wanted to give you the overall picture of what's happened from really June 1st, call it, up until now. And it's not alarming in any way. There are a number of things that come up, either through the contractor submitting requests for information, or the architect submitting clarification drawings, or really just all of us discovering something, and possibly the owner saying, well, that's not quite what we expected. Let's zigzag a little bit and do something slightly different. So happy to answer questions on what constitutes these numbers, but I wanted to lay out for you what those numbers are. So at Lake Bluff, we have incurred to date $44,000 worth of items. And these items are, there's really two significant pieces within that, and then a whole bunch of $1,000, $2,000 issues. So those two significant pieces are that we, due to the pandemic, looked at our plumbing fixtures and said, wow, we have a design approach that has manually operated faucets at both elementary schools. We need to upgrade that to touchless faucets. And so we did that, and that plumbing upgrade cost $20,000 at Lake Bluff. There's a similar cost over at Atwater, $20,000 approximately there as well. At Lake Bluff, we've had some discoveries with utility lines. So we had some stormwater utility lines that we were tying into on your own property that we discovered were compromised by roots. We ran a camera down it and found that it was compromised more than we could just kind of roto-rooter and cut roots out. So we actually removed 140 feet of stormwater piping on your property. So that was a cost upgrade, approximately $14,000 there at Lake Bluff. So those are the two big items. That accounts for $34,000 of the $44,000 at Lake Bluff. And as I said, the other items were some minor $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 here and there. Over at Atwater, as I said, again, we've got the plumbing upgrade, which accounts for $20,000. And then we discovered some greater deficiencies with your chimney than what were identified in the design process. So, for instance, the design process called for replacement of the top 3 feet of the brick of the chimney because they felt that was very much in disrepair, couldn't be repaired, had to be replaced. Once the scaffolding was all set up and people could inspect it, sort of face to face with the brick, our masonry contractor came back and said, yes, you've got that decay, but that decay is deeper than was anticipated from whatever perspective the designer was able to achieve previously. So we looked at that and agreed that about 8 feet of the top of that chimney needed to be replaced. We then looked at the remaining portion of the chimney, and that's a very tall chimney, and said that brick doesn't need to be replaced, but it is definitely in need of some tuck pointing, and that wasn't called for in the contract documents. So we've got about $37,000 in additional work on that brick chimney. And then finally, there's the manhole issue that I talked about at the front entryway. That's a $17,000 issue. So all told, at Atwater, we've incurred $148,000 of cost issues. And then finally, at the high school, because we got started much later on that, we really haven't had nearly as many cost issues.
Pablo,
yeah.
here, could you, just to put that in context, because I think the original bids for Atwater, could you tell us what how short they were of what we anticipated? That we came in well under budget. With that bid. Now we're saying this, but I want to look at the 48,000 additional costs in the broader framework of
yes,
how much savings we may have had.
I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to pull that number up right off the top of my head. I definitely have that information, but I want to say we were about $2 million under on the Atwater project.
That context is really helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. And one more thing to point out here is that we have there are 2 different contingencies on the project. So we've talked previously about the owner contingency, which is really just the difference between all of our expenses after bid day and your $65 million. And we've talked about that number as being $5.6 million, right? I don't know if you recall that. So that's just what's left, and that really kind of constitutes owner contingency at this point. But built into the Myron contract numbers, their guaranteed maximum price per building, is a construction contingency. That's a feature of every guaranteed maximum price contract. But we have it at a relatively high level. And that is at a high level because this is entirely renovation projects. And we just know that there are going to be issues out there. So really everything that I've talked about here as costs, we are looking to the construction contingency to absorb that. So when I talk about these costs, it's not the team coming back to you saying, hey, we got to grab some more money and put it into the contractor's contract. It's we're utilizing that allocation that's already within their contract.
Hey, I have one more quick question.
Yep.
You say the Atwater, there's a total of 148,000. You gave us examples of about half that. Was there a bunch of little other ones that made up that other half of the 148?
Yeah, so I gave you 37,000, 20,000, 17. So that's 57, 74. Yeah, one half. So yes, there are a whole bunch of other things. Give me just a second. We've replaced some hot water valves that weren't called for. We repaired cement around existing pipes in his catch basin. I mean, these are $2,000 issues. We've added some grab bars in toilet stalls where we felt we needed more. Kind of on and on like that. New subflooring at the classrooms that used to be the offices. We tore up the floor and said, wow, the subfloor is really much more decayed than anticipated. Let's take the whole subfloor out and rebuild it. That was a $14,000 issue. So that's a bit of a flavor of it.
Mike, can you, when you get a chance, just send us this document? Because it would be helpful, I think, for us to see.
Yeah, so we have it's called every contractor calls it something different. This is the potential cost issue log. And that is a little bit cryptic in its description of it. Behind that, I have a whole bunch of detail that we sit down and review. We actually did that with Dr. Davis earlier today, going through each one of them and giving our advice as to whether or not we knew what the issue was and found it acceptable, or whether or not we had further questions. But yes, I'll be happy to share that log with you. So I think
thank you.
That's everything I wanted to say about costs that we have come across so far. I do want to give you some.
Mike, you didn't finish with SHS.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So at the high school, we have a total of $16,000 worth of items that we've approved thus far. And really that $11,000 of that is that we discovered some plumbing supply lines that were in very bad shape. We went to shut off valves to be able to cut into and add to those plumbing supply lines, and the valves didn't work. We decided we need to replace those valves, and then just looked at the condition of the piping and said, boy, we've got to replace this piping, and that wasn't called for. Okay.
And do we not know what the heating oil tank removal is going to cost yet? Or?
We do not know that yet.
Okay. Thanks.
So by way of previewing some of the costs that come along, there are some bigger ones, and this falls in the category of do we proceed with them and inform the board of it, or do we seek approval from the board? And I know that you and Dr. Davis have had some discussions about that before, and we talked about it some today. So I'm just going to lay out what those things are. Over at the high school, the utility survey information indicated that we had, and help me with the streets here. The high school is bordered by
Oakland and Capitol.
Oakland and Capitol. So at Oakland, the survey indicated that we had I think a 14-inch stormwater line in the street that we were going to tie into. So they got out there into the manhole to find their tie-in location and found that that was an 8-inch stormwater line. So different from the information that was provided to us by the village. So because that's such a smaller stormwater line in the street, our engineer said we have to change our storage capacity for stormwater surge, which is built underneath the parking lot. So that stormwater storage capacity is a 5-foot diameter pipe of a certain length. And when they discovered that we were tying into an 8-inch stormwater line, they said we need to double the storage capacity on the site. So we now have 2 links of 5-foot diameter pipes that serve basically as big storage tanks and then slowly let the water out. So in the event of the 50-year flood or 100-year flood, your storage capacity would fill up underneath there and it would slowly discharge it into the village system. So that is a big cost that's coming down the line for us. We think we've got, with that and some other minor modifications at the parking lot, we got about $65,000 in cost for that. And that is not a price that I have from our contractors yet. That is an anticipated price. Also, the North Shore Fire Department requested that we not bring our new water service off of Oakland. The designers calculated that the service in Oakland was adequate to supply the high school. Excuse me. North Shore Fire Department said, we would like you to come off of Capitol. We have a greater capacity there. It is a newer line, and we feel more confident in it and would like you to make that change. So after some analysis and some consideration of the North Shore Fire Department's request, we decided to go along with their request, and that is about a $60,000 difference upgrade. Now, there's a feature that I'm going to talk about in a minute that will make that decision all the more beneficial. Well, I might as well jump into that. So these are old buildings. Every time you've modified the building, there has to be some upgrade to the National Fire Code and local fire codes. And all along the way, with every upgrade, there has been a reliance on being grandfathered in for modifications to a very, very old code. So that has happened with respect to you adding fire alarms. It's happened with respect to you adding fire barriers. So now we come along to a very, very significant renovation. And the designers looked again to modifications based on grandfathering into the old code. The North Shore Fire Department, I think appropriately, has said, is this the opportunity to really bring your buildings up to today's safety standards? Now, there is a cost to that, and that would be because we would fully fire sprinkle these buildings. So you have aspects of your buildings that have fire sprinkler systems. I think there's quite a bit of 1993 additions to, I think both elementaries and high school. I'm not sure about the high school actually, but certainly at the elementaries. So only those portions of the buildings that were added on at that time got fire sprinkler service. So now here we are, we're not adding on to those buildings, we're renovating them. We can probably get by with the grandfathering in, but it introduces a whole bunch of complexities that our architecturals have followed down that rabbit hole with respect to fire separation from corridor into classrooms. If we change course and we fully sprinkle the building, it simplifies some of our architectural modifications in this process and certainly simplifies your modifications in the future and gets to today's standard of fire protection. So we have asked both our mechanical design team and our contracting team to give us a rough order of magnitude cost for what it would take to fully sprinkle Atwater and Lake Bluff. I think we will be asking for something similar at the high school administration building. Our discussions haven't gone as far with respect to that building. So this comes back to that discussion about bringing the supply water line off of Capitol instead of Oakland, more reliable and bigger source from Capitol. If you are to sprinkle the high school administration building, we'll be happy that we went with a better source of water. So that's a big issue that's out there. Another one that's coming, I think we have discussed previously when we talked about some of the surplus funds we had. It was along the way a desire to really upgrade the technology infrastructure of the buildings, but that fell off in the design process. I think there was apprehension about what you could squeeze into this $65 million project, and structured cabling, so low voltage cabling for data, Wi-Fi, security, was the approach taken was a piecemeal approach. So we've gone back now that we've had more favorable bid conditions and said, gosh, this is the time to upgrade the IT infrastructure. And so we are seeking out pricing to completely replace the structured cabling. So that's category 6 low voltage wiring for, as I said, data, voice, Wi-Fi, and security lines. That price is coming and something you'll be able to decide on. And I think that's it as far as projecting future costs. I'll pause there.
Mike, you didn't have a projection yet then on the building, bringing the buildings up to code either, right? That's something that we're still, or did I miss that number?
No, I don't have the number.
Okay.
I think we'll have that yet this week.
Okay.
And I suspect we'd have the structured cabling number sometime next week.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, sorry. Can I just say, like, just to bookmark this, when we do get to that point of talking about the technology infrastructure, and just hoping we can hear from Mickey about the why it might or might not make sense, just in terms of like long-term usability and all that good stuff. Once we have a price.
Yeah, Mickey has been certainly a driver in that aspect, as you would expect. So if there are no other questions there, I do want to talk to you about some schedule impact pieces. So at Lake Bluff and Atwater, you of course know that this is a ongoing process where we turn over spaces periodically. There's a phase 1, a phase 2, and so on. As we look at the majority of classroom spaces that we're working on, there haven't been real significant changes to the schedule. However, at the entryways, which affects your admin office suite in both buildings, and of course affects your access through the front door, we have some significant delays. So right now we're looking at about October 1st for when we think we'll turn over the entryways at Atwater and Lake Bluff. Now, this is due to some of the complexities that I talked about earlier, primarily structural, and how we sort of stop and redesign in that process. So we have talked with the principals of both those schools and tried to think of what is their interim solution. Now, this may be the only fortunate piece of your situation with respect to starting school in the fall, is that we've had this issue. This is a significant issue. It would be an even more significant issue if you were moving right on and everything was normal with fall opening. But I wanted to make you aware of that.
Just to clarify, do we have, because we've talked about students who need special services to come into the buildings prior to November. So I know at Lake Bluff, I'm envisioning the back door, but unfortunately that's the only building I'm familiar with the access for folks on wheels. So is there going to be an issue in terms of like every student being able to access the other buildings?
So we have talked about that at length. If you picture Lake Bluff and you look to the parking lot that is back by the tennis courts, there's currently a ADA ramp down to a set of doors that has an operator on it. So that is an access point that we would promote as the main entry, not only for, so likely that would be the main entry for people with impaired mobility, and likely that would be the main entry for staff. It's expected that students would likely come into just around the corner into the cafeteria. And that way you can sort of manage an in and an out through the cafeteria, so you're not bogging everyone or bringing everyone in and out through the same opening. Over at Atwater, it's actually a fairly good scenario, but we've got some modifications to proceed with to make it work. So if you think of the 1993 edition on the back, which is the cafeteria, I believe, there is an ADA ramp entry at that point. Unfortunately, getting to that is not great. So you have the parking lot, and you're going to test me on my directions here. Towards Oakland, parking lot towards Oakland. Getting in that, well, actually it's an asphalt play area. Am I right on that? So dropping off there along the street to the west and coming through that asphalt play area towards the warming house. Now you can go around the back of the warming house and gain access to the 1993 edition. That is a asphalt path that is in very, very poor shape. It's not very wide and it's decayed. So we are talking about casting a new concrete pathway around the warming house that would be 5 feet wide and would be a path for really all the students to come in back through that 1993 edition. Does that make sense?
Brian, when do you anticipate having the space issues worked out for the principals and admin suite offices?
So
yeah, go ahead. As far as what they look like in that space.
Well, no, just if they can't be in them when they're expected to be doing work from the buildings, when will you know where they will be?
Yeah, we're working on that right now. So we'll be able to get a communication out, I think, probably by the end of the week. to be able to just identify where that space is. But so that's something that the principals are working on.
And then what about too for staff that had to pack up their offices, in March or April, and their classrooms aren't accessible right now because they're being worked on, but perhaps staff need extra time to get into their office or their building classroom things. How is that being worked out? Or is that also, are those teachers getting priority to kind of identify any things that they need from those classroom storage places?
Yeah, so at Atwater and Lake Bluff, we looked at each space for a turnover date. So it's a different date for various spaces within the building. For instance, if you look at the Atwater EEC, that's coming along quite well, but is slightly behind schedule. So there, we have moving set up back into the EEC on September 3rd. So that's a pinch for a September 8th start date. But that's our target, to bring the movers back in, unload the trucks on September 3rd and 4th.
Okay. But that's not for all of the classrooms. That's just for the ones that are turning over. Like you just mentioned a turnover date. So each classroom has a different one that could go into the middle of September or the end of September.
Yes.
Yeah.
With the farthest out date being the administrative suites that are connected to the entry as October 1st.
So then to Hillary's point, I guess, like how would you then get your access to your materials if you're a classroom teacher?
Good question. It's all there on site, but it's in a trailer. So we have invited our movers to come and join us at our owner architect contractor meetings this coming Monday. So Coakley Brothers Moving will be in attendance, and they have been put on notice that we have these range of dates for them to move things back in. So I would expect that we are resolving those issues on Monday.
Yeah, I would just hope we can put sort of an extra priority or mindfulness on the teachers who don't have access to their classroom materials because they're packed up. Right. Just as they're planning, the start of the year, I can imagine that's quite stressful if you don't have any of the things that perhaps you need to start planning the year. So just in those conversations with the movers, if we can put an extra focus on those teachers that, that their classrooms are packed up, I think that would be good.
Agreed.
Mike, can I just ask, because I want to get back to kind of the contract thing that we're voting on. And I appreciate all this information. It's very helpful. And I am very grateful that you have been with us, given our business manager situation that we find ourselves in. But we are kind of in the beginning of a long multi-year process of doing this work. So yeah. Looking at the hours that you have been putting in, would you anticipate there needing to be additional increases in hours as we get further into construction, or do you anticipate this to be, the level of work as being what it is, and this is the price moving forward? I guess I'm just asking, are you going to come back in a year or so and say this is more than what we thought?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm going to give you a bit of the company line, which rings very true. So in the 20-year history of my company, I've never, ever gone back to a client and asked for more money than what we proposed. When we got signed up, we were basically told, yeah, you get the job, but I got to get your price down to this. I, at that time, thought that's not what I think the job deserves. And now we're in a situation where the support from within the district is less than what we signed up for. So I'm merely trying to get back to what we proposed. So no, if we can get back to what I laid out and what I proposed would be what I think is the right approach to the project. Like every other client in our 20-year history, there'll be no coming back looking for more.
Thank you.
Mike, can I get a clarifying question on the issue of the packing and when teachers making sure to follow up what Hillary was saying to make sure that they're able to get the stuff when they need it to get back in the building. Is it and you were mentioning how I guess they're going in rotation, but is it every teacher now that's packed up in the same places, or are there different locations, or do teachers know where that stuff is? I'm imagining you guys, the movers, all know where it is, but how many of the teachers are all packed up?
So when we brought Coakley in, we handed over a strategy to them. There was, for instance, the EEC at Atwater. The entire building had to be emptied, and we wanted to get it all within 1 or 2 trailers. So I think it wound up being 2 trailers. That is all the EEC. So we can go right to those 2 trailers, know where those contents go, and they will all come back at once. Now it gets more complicated when you get into the building, because we said, okay, we're going to move out spaces that will move back in at the end of the summer. So those all have to go together. And then we would move out some spaces where the principals at that time told us that can go away, but it doesn't have to come back until after phase 2 construction. So all of those items are in different trailers. So we're in a situation now where the items that we expected to bring back in at the end of the summer, some of that holds true, and some of that has been delayed. But I think the point that Hillary made is that even if those spaces are delayed, people need access to them. So I think we're still going to those same trailers, and we're moving it all. We just might not have the end space that's appropriate to move it into. We got to figure out where we do that. It may be a strategy that says, we'll get you into the trailer and we'll get some things, or it may be a strategy that says, let's find a space where we can put all the things so you have access to it.
So not everybody's packed up right now. Some of the stuff is still in their spaces. Okay. And
certainly like phase 3 construction, we didn't touch it. It's all sitting in the room still.
Okay. Because Brian, I guess where I was getting at was with the model that we have going forward, where we're going to be phasing in, depending on where those specific groups of teachers are, is going to be important, right?
And we have a phasing plan. I mean, our phasing plan that we set up in the spring was as if we would have all the kids back in the buildings. So we have, flex spaces, as we would have certain pods, certain sections of rooms that would be under renovation. We have flex spaces for those staff members to go to. So we're just in a process of, just calibrating that timing as the schedule has been a little bit in flux, and working through that.
So is it about any given time then, do we have about 1/3 of each of the elementary schools, and I guess it would really only pertain to them right now, packed up and moved out? Is that about what it looks like? I'm just trying to picture what that might look like.
No, I wouldn't say 1/3. I don't think that many. Number of rooms. I mean, we're doing the offices now, so it's not as cut and dry, but we're trying to group rooms in like groups of 4. So from a contracting standpoint, as you bring in certain subcontractors, they can do kind of certain areas, and they're not running all over the building. So we've kind of just developed those sections as part of the phasing plan to be able to move throughout the building.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, and I think there was just one last scheduling item. We've talked previously about the gym at Atwater and how we had a big discovery there when we took down the suspended ceiling. We've made some architectural adjustments, but that definitely delayed some of our asbestos abatement and some of our ability to put things back together. So that we're pushed back about a month on the date of the Atwater Gym as well. And that is my report.
Thanks. So the report was kind of an additional discussion item to the request for approving an increase in hours. So does anybody have any additional questions about that piece?
No.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. I have a motion and a second to approve extended hours for Huffman Facility Development. All those in favor, I'll take a roll call. Emily?
Aye.
Hillary?
Aye.
Pablo?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
And aye from myself. Thanks again, Mike. And so we'll hear back from you in a month, yes?
Yes, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, next up is I will take approval of the 2020 fall sports schedule.
So moved, Pablo.
Thank you. And can I get a second from somebody?
I'll second. Clark.
Thanks, Clark. So Brian provided us with an executive summary of his recommendation to start what he called low risk sports on August 24th, and then other sports to be determined. Does anybody have any questions for him?
I had two, but I guess I was just looking for clarification. So Brian, this is consistent with the rest of the Woodland Conference. Is that correct?
Yeah, we had a superintendent's call on Monday morning, and yeah, this is consistent with what the rest of the conference is looking at this point. We're going to meet also next Thursday or Friday to look at kind of where people are at for the higher risk sports and that move.
And does this affect, we have quite a few club sports that use our facilities, and I'm thinking of other, does this affect their ability to use our facilities? So I'm just thinking, well, I can't think of any right now that it would affect, but I wanted to make sure that if we would vote this, it wouldn't affect those who also use our facilities.
Yeah, this vote wouldn't, I don't think would spill into that. I think that would be a separate conversation around facility use and activities that we would deem safe and appropriate at that time. So this is simply around just our sports that we have for this fall, and to provide some direction for our athletes and coaches and families.
Brian, can I ask a question about invitationals or meets? So Shorewood we are a mask required district. What would happen if what would be the expectation if we went to a district where masks were not required? Have we thought through all those kind of, or if they came to I assume if somebody comes to us, they have to wear a mask, but if we go there, what's the expectation?
That's the important part. We think about having some common expectations across the conference or across other places that we would go to, that we would want to have those expectations all laid out. So right now, the athletic directors are working on protocols for those sports that we would look at related to low risk. I think they're looking at all the sports, but specifically the low risk sports, and that we would have expectations of mask. I think the conversation now is around mask requirements, unless you're engaged in a strenuous activity. So, thinking about cross country, certainly at the beginning, at the end, as you're running the race, then there's just conversations around where that would land. All of the conversations that we've had and at this point have centered around also around spectators and about allowing people to come in and watch. And so generally, and again, this would need to be finalized, but generally we're at a point where we would have no spectators there. again, for the safety and to be able to manage the event. So that essentially it would be essential workers who would be adults who would be working the event, along with the athletes and coaches that would be involved. So those protocols are things that are being established right now, and that we would have laid out as far as the conference expectations. And then certainly if there's any invitationals, we would really look at minimizing the number of kids. Like, for example, when you may have a 20-team invitational historically, like for cross country, that we would not have that. That we would run events that would be more 2 or 3 teams running at a time, and be able to space that out. So all of those accommodations are being looked at this point.
And then what about the busing? Is it the same? Like, would we get a second bus so that people are spaced out on the bus?
Yeah, to be able to space them out and follow protocols that we would talk to the North Shore Health Department related to those protocols. Many of our conference schools have regular buses that they run for their kids, and so there's conversations around best practices and what they're expecting. So we want to make sure that we have those protocols as an expectation.
And so when can parents who are potentially signing their kids up for this and students get it? When will they be getting information about all these details?
About the protocols and such?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so again, our conference superintendents are meeting next, I think it was Thursday or Friday. And so that would be a point where we can make a final decision on the schedules. And then those protocols, we would have our school protocols for practices up to those events. And then I think that following week would be a week that we would expect the athletic directors to be able to put out some standard protocols for safety related to each sport individually, which is going to be different for tennis than it is cross country and that type of thing. So I expect to be able to have a standard protocol that we would be able to follow.
Great, thanks. Other
Brian,
questions?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, is there a thought or a plan about what we might have to do if the actual events and competitions can't go forward, but we still have opportunities to allow the teams to, I guess, participate in activities together? I mean, I know it's not ideal, but I would think that we wouldn't automatically abandon that right away, would we?
No, I think if we needed to be creative in that regard, I think our coaches would do the best they can to engage our kids in fun, competitive activities internally, inter squad types of things.
Right.
And just to be able to, we know that it's really important for many of our students to be able to engage in these types of activities and do some team building and just from a mental health standpoint to compete. And even if it's, again, against your peers, we'd want to make sure we're maximizing those opportunities.
Because some of those will have to pivot based on decisions that aren't actually in our control, right?
Correct. Yeah. And that's why we're really trying to walk closely with the rest of the conference, which has been great. And the athletic directors have been meeting really all summer to work through that. And then the superintendents have just provided some guidance this week and follow that up next week.
Okay. Thanks.
I guess I'm still kind of unclear about why we as a board are voting on this, because I feel like this is an operational decision, and I'm sort of of two minds. Like I guess we have signed off on a back to school plan that lays out kind of what kind of safety standards we're comfortable with, but without having those details or any sense of protocols at in terms of what we have yet, like I understand they're coming, but without them in front of me, like I don't feel like I can endorse us returning to these sports. But that said, like I'm still questioning like whether you need my endorsement to go or our endorsement to go forward. I guess from my point, like I would just appreciate like updates on those protocols and assurance that we are we've made as a policy, as your policy decision, to follow what the conference is doing and follow our own policy decisions we've made about masks, for instance. and just trust that that is going to govern how we participate in sports going forward. I just don't like, I'm just struggling with kind of why, like, we're signing off on this, and I don't feel like I can, but I also don't feel like I need to. Does that make any sense? I'm sorry if the rest of you are
Sure.
following at all in terms of policy.
I think because we, I mean, it's not about like the actual protocols, it's about the calendar and which sports are moving forward. So we essentially are saying only which sports we are giving the green light to right now and which sports are indefinitely on hold. So it isn't like normally, you're right, like normally we're not involved at all in the athletic calendar and the kind of what sports we even have in Shorewood, but because it's essentially related to reopening and safety, I thought, since we voted on that, it would make sense for us to vote on this. I think we could decide either way. If people don't feel like we need to have a formal vote on this, that's fine with me. So, but that was my thinking. So
I guess even deciding on the calendar, like I can guess, what, or based on the what's in the report or the recommendation, like that these contact sports are higher risk, like that makes sense to me to put them off, but that's really not a ton of information. Like, I guess I would want to know what all really fully went into that decision. I don't know.
So the higher risk designation is designated by the WIA
Okay.
and the National Federation for Athletics. I don't remember the acronym exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So those are not designations that we are making solely as a district,
Okay.
but would be designated at a state level as a way to really kind of separate in the context of the pandemic, be able to separate what what events may be obviously more risky than other ones to try to use it as a decision-making process.
Okay. And then just to be clear, again, in terms of meets, invitationals, and how whether and how we participate, if we approve this, we're still that the authority to kind of decide how and whether we participate in off-campus events still rests with you, just to be clear.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
that's how I would see it. I would work closely with the athletic director and have our expectations around mask wearing and safety protocols and all of those things would need to be part of that as if we were to move forward. So
okay, so essentially we're voting on which sports go forward. You still are deciding how they go forward.
correct. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and I'll certainly provide you with updates
And the
on
date,
kind of,
I guess the start date being the key thing, right? Okay.
I do want to
Yeah,
say,
and
Emily, too, that was discussed, like some of these sports intricacies and questions were discussed in the work group, in the health and safety work group. So there was, that was one of the first kind of conversations that we did have, looked at some of those finer point questions. So LeVar was part of that, Joe Paddock was part of that. There were coaches were on that conversation. So those things were sort of discussed in the vein. But these things, I think, were different than what was anticipated in terms of how the sports would go on in the fall. Just for a little context.
Thanks.
and the urgency of now is to be able to just have a decision as we would get kids signed up, and that we would have an opportunity. We pushed the low risk sports back a week. They were originally scheduled by the WIA as being able to begin on the 17th. And so we thought if from a conference standpoint, if we're going to look at pushing back indefinitely the higher risk sports, there may be student athletes that want to participate in some of the low risk activities that historically have done the high risk ones. And so we wanted to just give us an extra week to be able to have those families and student athletes be able to make a decision on that as we go. But then again, we also need to sign up and get going on it as we move forward. So that's why the timing is important.
Pablo, did you want to say something? Oh, Jack? No? Okay. Pablo, did you want to say something? No? Any other
No.
further discussion? Oh, sorry. Okay. So I have a motion and a second to approve of the essentially the fall athletics, like which sports are moving forward, approval of the 2020 fall sports. So I will take a roll call. All in favor? So Pablo,
Aye.
Hillary,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
and I from myself. All right. So looking forward to hopefully seeing some students having the opportunity to participate. All right, I will take a motion for the superintendent's consent agenda.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? I will take a roll call. Clark,
Aye.
Pablo,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Hillary,
Aye.
and I from me. So welcome, Miss Newmeyer, and we will miss you next year, Miss Zutoff. Looking forward to having you back. All right, so board action agenda items. I was asked by the board president at WASA to co-sign on 3 resolutions for WASB that I've included here. And so I think I'm going to, they're all under one approval of these co-sign resolutions, but probably we should, I don't know. Do you think we need to approve of them separately? This is one of those, no? Okay, so I will take a motion to approve these 3 co-sign resolutions from WASA.
So moved, Pablo.
Second, Emily.
Thank you. So we co-signed with them for the mascots resolution last time. And then they've written these 2 other ones specifically around broadband access and then Act 31. Do people have any questions or comments about it?
I don't have any questions about the resolution. Mine was more a reminder for myself as to who is our WASB delegate for the resolutions. Pablo, was that you? I know Emily did it last year, but Pablo, you're doing it this year?
Yeah.
Okay.
This year, I'm going to give it a shot.
Okay.
No, I think these are
Well, this
great.
year will be a little bit different because we could all be part of it, probably.
We could all be part of it.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the reasons, I mean, so much has changed and transpired since this resolution first, went up to the entire association in January, and it didn't pass by a fairly decent margin. I think this year will be a lot different. So I'm optimistic that because the tides have changed nationally, that we'll have a more honest and thoughtful discussion centered on equity, especially around the first one, and the other ones as well. Both, you can tie in equity to both of those as well. Yeah, I mean, we take it for granted having at least the ability to get or pay for decent internet access if we want it where we live. But if you live up in the Wausau area and you live behind a patch of trees, doesn't matter. I'm thinking because my in-laws, they get 5 gigabytes of internet a month. That's all they get, and it's super slow. So I imagine they're okay, but I'm imagining a household with kids that's trying to learn virtually with 5 gigabytes of memory at a very slow speed and what that means for them. Like, you can go to most of the developing world and you can go into rural areas in the developing world and you'll see faster internet there than you will in rural US. So yeah, I wholeheartedly support all 3 and the Act 31 as well.
Okay, great. Okay, so I have a motion and a second. I will take a roll call. All in favor? Pablo?
Aye.
Hillary?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
And I for myself. Thanks. I'll let them know. All right, and then up next is, so our board work plan is a OE that needs to be approved when we update it. So we need to update it, and I wanted to have a discussion about that. So I think I'll take a motion to approve this one, and then we can make the amendments afterwards. So a motion to approve our 2020-2021 work plan.
So move.
Thank you.
Second.
Thanks, Clark. All right, so a couple of things that I wanted to talk about is, so we need to move OE10 facilities and OE4 personnel reports to September, since we didn't get those done in July and August. The ones for the board that I wanted to talk about are also the workshops. So we have discussed having monthly workshops, and so I'd like us to populate that with things that we'd like to put in those workshops starting this month, and see if there's any discussion about that or people's thoughts about where they want to start. I originally was putting in ones that were kind of related to reports that were going to be coming up. So I thought like that would be a good opportunity for us to deep dive into those prior to seeing them. But they could be also, I've also thought about reviewing again our student results policies in this moment of kind of changes in instruction. And I don't think we're going to have the same kinds of indicators anymore. So something for us to, I think, consider and talk about.
I would think for the first month that makes sense, because I do think there are indicators, particularly for this year, that are not probably as relevant or relevant. And so I think to begin the workshops, that seems like a good place to start. And quite honestly, I'd have to do some thinking for future ones.
Okay.
As to what would be my priority list.
Okay.
I'd like to talk through, I forget which OE this would be in, but just instructional technology.
Okay.
Digital citizenship, just revisit that, just given, the
Mm-hmm.
world.
Our first workshop might have been a year and a half ago. We had one on mental health, and we brought in some community experts. I don't think we could ever deal with that topic enough, particularly now, with the isolation that so many folks are feeling. So, I think that would be, we're going to have to look at and try to gauge how our community is doing in this new format and how we can provide supports. We've made some tremendous progress bringing on the folks from Children's and things, but just leveraging and making sure that that part of the wellness is taken care of. The mental
Okay.
health. And then I would add to that, this is ongoing for us, but I don't know if we need to be very explicit, but equity, because it permeates all of our policies and our results. We've drawn even more attention to it in our last reviews. But with the ICS work, I don't know if we might want to have some space during those times to work through some of the modules. Because the faculty, staff, administration are going to be working through the modules. I think it would behoove us to do some of that PD ourselves. We'd even talked with the trainers from ICS about
community.
Us helping lead those, with our community. So I don't want to get into the weeds and get into like the day-to-day stuff. As exciting as it is, what's going on in the district, and it really is kind of exciting. It is exciting. It's not kind of exciting. but I think it would help us better understand what's going on and then communicate that to our village and, you know, other stakeholders.
Yeah, I think what I'm not sure if this is what you were first getting at, but I thought about how we start to roll in like the ICS learning into our policies, and I feel like we don't want to get ahead of what the teachers work, right? Like we need to know that they're, you know, the district is ready to you know, meet those expectations. But, you know, so I think we're gonna, like, my thought is like we're gonna have to do that on a rolling basis. So if we're starting with like module 1, it would be like, where can we acknowledge you know, the history of inequities and the way those have manifested in public school systems. Maybe we don't in our policy, but we just sort of, you know what I'm saying, like work through each module ourselves and think as the district is going through those. Does that make sense?
Pablo, you're shaking your head. Sorry.
Oh,
You just muted yourself.
I did. I should have muted myself to indicate that I was done talking. I was just nodding, kind of in agreement and listening to Emily.
I think, and maybe we can talk to Sam about this when he gives us his report on ICS. I think that there's, it's part of the strategic planning process. So maybe that's where, what you can see is on this agenda as well. So maybe we can figure out a way to include it there as part of our conversations. So, all right, so I have for the first 3 months, start with results review and indicators for the, in a year where we're not potentially doing the same kinds of assessments, instructional technology, and then, oh, and like maybe digital citizenship, and then mental health and wellness. Yeah. Okay, and then I wanted to also, just since we have this up, we should probably at least start thinking about linkages and how we want to do them this coming year. So if people have thoughts.
Yeah, at our last meeting, which is wonderful, we got lots of just wonderful community feedback. One of the ideas that arose was having a linkage, and that may be happening, or not a linkage per se may be happening, but with parents of kids special needs. And we had talked about doing one earlier rather than later. And I don't know, maybe Brian, I think Julie's on the line. I don't know what kind of outreach is going on, but I think it would behoove us to have our finger on the pulse a little bit better going forward, especially due to, you know, going to a virtual plus model and the possibilities that arise, and making sure that we capture and capitalize on all the opportunities that we have.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did special parents with special needs last year, and it was one of them. It was very, very helpful. And considering that's one of our focus points right now, I see Julie. Sorry, did I cut you off? Were you going to say something?
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Julie's got
Julie,
a really
you're
bad
on like,
echo right
I think
now.
you're like on like somehow you're on 2 screens. So I don't know what's happening. But yeah, there's like a weird
We
echo
have
with
to
you.
go out and go back in.
All right, let me just do that.
So I agree with you guys. I think the thing for me is that, one, I don't think we should wait till October, because
Right.
essentially these linkages are going to be kind of how are things going, and like planning for the next phase of what school's going to be like. So I think we probably need to do them in September, even though we don't start till September 8th, like maybe at the end of September, beginning of October. And then, you know, I think this list that I'm looking at here really focuses a lot on, you know, the students and the parents, which is maybe where we want to start, and then think about talking to like our community partners later. So I don't know, that would be the other suggestion I would have.
I know at one point we talked about doing sort of a set amount of time before our meetings for a town hall
Right.
format. and I almost think that the fall is the time to perhaps implement that, because there is going to be so much change and so many things that we want to do and talk about and hear from, you know, families about. So I wonder, in lieu of linkages, because I would argue that I don't want to do the linkages where we group them all in 1 month. I don't think that's necessarily advantageous, and just from a schedule standpoint, that's difficult. But I don't know if that's a better way to format it, to have these conversations in a set time frame that, you know, we can have
So
the
do it like
conversations
right
we want.
before the meeting?
Yeah, do it right before the meeting, where it's not trying, everyone would then know, you know, before the board meeting on Tuesday nights, that's the time that these are going to happen. So perhaps it would allow for, you know, just a more consistent time for people to know about.
I like that idea.
Something I think we could try for the first half of the year, perhaps.
Okay. All right, so I will make those updates. We also need to have in September a fall retreat, and then there's a CISA 1 regional meeting. And I think, Emily, are you a CISA 1 rep? Okay. So the changes I'm going to make are moving OE4 and OE10 reports to September. I'm going to add to the workshops. August is going to be results review. September is instructional technology and digital citizenship. October is mental health and wellness. And then I'm going to move the linkages up to September and call them town halls for the 2 board meetings. And then we can revisit again. I'm just going to try to actually put this on our board agenda like every month, because there's probably things we need to be revisiting every month at least. So does that sound okay?
Yeah, I was just going to ask that, Peru, if we could put that on there.
Okay.
The other thing too with the town hall is that which meeting of the month would we want to do that? The first or the second?
I think we were thinking both.
Oh, really? Okay, so do one before each meeting.
Yeah, that's what I think I heard. Yeah.
Okay, because that might also help us decide when to actually do specific linkages too, depending on what feedback we're getting.
Oh, I think the thing is that we should still invite people specifically to them.
Sure.
So that, you know, so yeah. Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, one of the things I think was so helpful was that Julie had, you know, with the parents with students with special needs, she had invited the parents that she knew and specifically extended an invitation. That made a big difference, I think.
Yep.
Especially since those parents probably need to make like additional arrangements. It's not quite as easy for them to, maybe it virtually, not as much. For this first workshop, I wondered if we might ask if Jack and Sadie are available. I'd love to have them be part of that. Actually, all of these, but particularly if we're talking about student results, just, I don't know. I like to hear their thoughts on all those things.
Definitely. They'll be invited to all of them. Don't worry.
Would you like an update about the outreach to parents of students with disabilities?
Sure.
Okay, so actually tomorrow evening, we're going to be having a meeting. We've sent out invitations to all parents and students in the district, students who have disabilities. And so essentially we're going to be hosting a meeting to just listen to their experiences from when the school was closed down and the school closure. And then also talk about what Virtual Plus means, what the Plus model means for students with disabilities. And then moving forward, ask for input as far as you know, what they feel they need and the supports and services that would be helpful in the process of reopening this school year. So that's in the works. After the last board meeting, thought that would be a good way to follow up on those concerns and really just give an opportunity for parents and students to be able to express their concerns and be able to work together. So it's really focused on building relationships and creating partnerships in our work together, because it's very important at this time that we do so.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Pablo, did you have a question?
Well, we started out talking about workshops, and then we jumped to linkages, which is
Oh,
great.
sorry. Yeah.
Oh, no, don't apologize. I think this is great. I just want to make sure that, if there are other suggestions, and I've got a couple that we work through them. So I didn't know if you're going to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so under under the operational expectations,
Mm-hmm.
where will we, or there's operational expectations like 8
Mm-hmm.
and I think, is it 10 that's not there?
10 is there. It's in July.
Yeah, 10 is there, but 8 and 11.
So you'll remember that we have a change in numbers.
Okay.
So I will ask Kelly to get you a new book, but because Marta combined 3 of them into one.
Oh, that's right.
Remember? So that's why. I know
Sorry.
it's a little.
No, thank you.
Nope, that's fine. Yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned that.
Same thing with governance culture, like 3 through 5 and 8. I was thinking, so governance culture we have right now under June. And I'm wondering, I guess we could do them in June. That's when we had been doing. I was thinking moving 3 through 5 and 8 to like April, May, because those are months that don't have as much, and that's when we would declare like any, because we talked about refining our conflicts of interest if we have any.
I think it might make some sense to do it in May with the new member retreat.
New member, yeah.
So, okay.
And then the other thing, if we could add to May, and this is something I've been wanting to do, and some of the folks on the call know I've been wanting to do this, is I'd love to get to the point where we could present a proposal for the state convention in January, but that proposal needs to be planned in May and proposed by June, around any number of things that we're doing here that I think would be of interest. And we all probably hear from partner districts that are interested in learning about, our equity work, learning about our governance, learning about how we've navigated different waters. I'm sure you all, receive inquiries from other boards. So I think we have stories to share. And as much as I enjoy going to WASB, I feel like I take a lot, but I think it's also incumbent upon us to give and share our story, which is one that we can be proud of. We're always growing.
No, that's a great idea. And I think, yeah, is it due in May?
No, I think it's due in June, but
we'd have to talk about it in May. Okay.
Yeah. I would like to sit down. And along that line, one of the things that kind of came out earlier this summer was the need for more, actually since spring, more targeted, more concerted efforts around advocacy. And there's so much going on in the past few months. We usually talk about funding from the state level, but we've seen how much funding from the federal level can impact us, as a result of COVID and threats from the president, on down to some of our legislative leaders in Wisconsin. We really have to work together on this. And I was thinking, I don't know if we have like a board ad hoc committee that has this as their task, and it would be made up of, a couple board members. I'm thinking, not to pick on her, but Amy Miller, who does a lot of this already through her own work. In fact, I think she sent Dr. Davis an email saying, she met with Governor Evers on Monday and wanted to know what types of messages she could take to the governor. Things such as pushing that third Friday count back. And so I think the more we can put our collective heads together, I would love to see some admin, teachers, community members, and definitely a couple board members involved in that advocacy. Now, that wouldn't necessarily be a monthly thing, but some group that kind of is constantly in touch and has their finger on the pulse of what's going on, so that we can respond, and concerted efforts with our neighboring districts. There's times where we've partnered with Wausau in the past. I mean, what you're doing with Wausau, and you've led this one, is a key example of that. But I think we need it, for me, otherwise it falls to the.
Yeah, I know. I agree. I think it's a great idea. Do you want to pull together kind of like a description of the ad hoc committee and what their role would be, and who might, like, what the different groups might be who would be involved, and we can bring it to another board meeting and start it going?
Yeah, I think that'd be great. Okay.
Okay.
Parker, I had another idea on I was just noticing the facilities column was kind of empty, and thought it might be nice to give an opportunity to the public for like an update, like mid-year. We could maybe ask, maybe Brian has thoughts now, or just could talk to Mike and figure out, like, or even with Myron too, like when would be a logical sort of stopping point to like present, like, here's what's done and here's what's next, and just give folks a time to ask questions.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and we can look at our phasing plan. There's some natural, targeted breaking points where we could do that.
Perfect.
Okay. Anything else on the? Oh yeah, go ahead, Pablo.
Yeah, a couple things. So under budget this year, things kind of happened a little quicker than we expected in March, with things shutting down. But in March and April, we had talked about having, kind of budget presentations and an opportunity for the community to weigh in. I know there was a lot of concern around, advanced learning, and I'm sure others had other concerns that maybe we didn't hear about. But I think that should probably be a standing type thing we have in February, March, where we have a clearer, although we have no clear idea of what our budget is now in August than we did in March. But having an opportunity for the community to hear from our district what our priorities are, and to have a chance to weigh in.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I think March and April is probably when would make the most sense.
And that would we tie into that the idea that Marta had when she was going to do a presentation on how it all, how the funding and stuff works too, not just what's in our budget and how we got there, but how some of this all works. The 101.
Some of the mechanics.
Yeah.
Yeah, the mechanics of school funding.
Correct.
And assuming we're going back on November 9th, we might want to reactivate the nutrition work group. I know we would meet quarterly, I think. Maybe that's, given everything else we have right now, maybe that's kind of on pause for a while. But I just wanted to, that's my dog. I just wanted to just not let that get too far in the rear view mirror. That said, huge shout out to the folks that are providing us lunch, our kids, our community lunch throughout the whole summer. Amazing. I haven't taken advantage of it this summer, but wow, it's amazing.
Okay, I have a long list of things I'm going to add, which I'm just going to not go through now. But I think if we could take a motion with amendments, recommended amendments that you guys made, I'll add all those to the list, and then bring it back. Or I can just, if you guys would rather, I can just make the amendments and bring it back, and then we can vote to approve it. It's up to you.
If we're going to keep putting it on, you can just bring it back and we can approve it.
Yeah, doesn't matter.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay. Will do. So then we'll go ahead and just table that item. Okay. And then a board consent agenda for board meeting minutes. So I will take a motion for the July 28th board meeting minutes.
I move we adopt the board consent agenda.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? I'll take a roll call. Hillary?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
Pablo?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
And I for myself. Thank you. All right, so moving on to district operations, Sam Coleman gave us an update on the ICS equity work that he's been doing. Sam, did you have any comments you wanted to add to your executive summary?
Yes, I just want to talk through just a few couple moments around the work that we can anticipate with our equity work. And for those who aren't able to see the executive summary, or when you hear the term ICS and there's still some questions around what that means, I just wanted to give some clarity around how that connects to the way we operationalize the work that has been done in our strategic planning processes.
Sam, if I could just interrupt you, because you drew attention to the executive summary, I just wanted to tell people I dropped the link again in the chat.
Oh.
And if anybody wants to follow along, if you're not already, I think Sam's around page 23 is where the executive summary is. That's all I got, Sam. Keep going.
Oh,
Thanks.
no, perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. So the work that we've done for ICS, which stands for Integrated Comprehensive Systems for Equity, is the approach that we're taking to be responsive to the recommendations that came out of our strategic planning work that we concluded this spring. And so if you all remember, we, for 6 months, met with teachers, community members, students, administration, and board members to set priorities and goals for the next 5 years and ultimately eliminate inequities within our district so that we are truly being equitable for all of our students. And so there were 3 recommendations that came out of that work, and that was to implement or prioritize a social justice curriculum, to adopt anti-racist pedagogy in our approaches to teaching and learning, and to address the culture of fear that has prevented staff from addressing inequity and injustice. And so the way that we achieve that is through transforming our systems. And so there were 7 systems identified around our professional learning, our curriculum, instruction and assessment, our staff recruitment, student discipline, opportunities that we provide to our students through extracurricular and after school, family engagement, and then our financial and resources management. So ICS, which again, Integrated Comprehensive Systems for Equity, provides that research-based operating system to approach and sustain equity from a systems form of just understanding that the reason why inequities exist is not because of people's bad intentions, but it's because inequities inherently exist within our systems, that our system has a legacy of setting up advantages for a normed group, and then that legacy has adverse implications for students who don't fit inside that normed group. So that would be our Black and Brown students, students who are learning English, students with disabilities. And so what we want to do is take a systems approach to disrupting that. So I guess I want to thank our board for their participation in our ICS Institute this summer. Our district leadership team met last week, and we'll continue to meet to develop our annual plans toward integrating the ICS professional learning content into a regular rhythm at the school level so that all of our staff are oriented and trained around how to take a systems approach and a very pragmatic approach to ensuring that equity is truly integrated in all that we do. The last piece that I want to add is the reality that this work and those who were a part of the Institute talked about how helpful this work was and how energized they were from the work and how they appreciated the discussions. And that's the easy part of the work is being in the PD. The heavy lift comes when resistance comes, and I want us to all anticipate as a board, as a school faculty, and as a community I want us to anticipate resistance. I want us to anticipate distraction. I want us to anticipate other things to do instead of focusing on equity. And I want us to anticipate the liberal embracing of equity because it's the right thing to say, but in the moment, not necessarily always being the right thing to do. And the reason why I'm calling attention to this is the equity work that is ahead of us, transforming a system. It is very disruptive. It is very uncomfortable. It brings about controversy when we begin to talk about the allocation of our resources or expectations that we carry out, or truly prioritizing students' needs first. That comes with it comes with resistance. And if I were to channel Frederick Douglass, I mean, that's what his work is about, is, there's no, if there's no struggle, then there is no progress. And those who profess to favor freedom, and if we were to interchange freedom with equity, yet we don't value agitation. We're just people who want crops without plowing the ground. We want rain without the thunder and lightning, or we want the ocean without the roar of its mighty waters. And so if we truly want equity, and I believe that we do, I believe that as a community, as a district, we've answered the call for equity, then we have to step up and be prepared to power through every form of resistance that's going to come with that, if we truly want this. And I presume that we do. I just want us to be prepared for what that means when we continue to take this path beyond discussion, beyond professional development, and into the transformative, disruptive work that we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, no, go ahead. Question.
I guess my question is more kind of thinking through what you just said, but also having sat in those 3 days of the Institute and knowing the importance of doing these modules in order and with fidelity. I have heard comments, rumors, innuendos that, there are some who want to take this work and manipulate it to something different than what the modules and the work that was laid out for us those early days in July. So that makes the job even harder if we're not going to do this work through to, infidelity. So I know that puts a lot of pressure on the district leadership team and the teams in the buildings that will be leading this work. So I guess my question is, what support do we have from the two wonderful doctors, and of course right now I'm blanking on both of their names, to help when those things start to get off track? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And thank you for raising the point around, we have to make a commitment to this work in the way that it was designed to fidelity and move according to the rhythm that it was designed in. So Dr. Capper and Dr. Fatura are our facilitators, and as a part of our agreement that we entered into with our ICS for Equity Partnership is access to Dr. Capper and Fatura for scheduled coaching, as well as access to them for consulting. So if things get off track, which in some districts they have, if there is contention around the application of the modules, again, beyond PD, but into the implementation and operationalizing them, then we do have the advice and the ability to consult with Dr. Capper and Dr. Fatura around strategizing for that resistance, and even just the predictability of what would happen in our context as we apply some of the principles from those modules. And so the benefit is some of the experiences that they've had have been in similarly situated districts, and so they can help us forecast the reactions to or consequences of the application of our equity work according to the modules, and then that would help us prepare to power through that without getting off track. And certainly it would help us as a district leadership team and as a board hold each other accountable for approaching our work according to the way that is outlined. Mm-hmm.
Sam, can I ask a question about the PD that's happening now at each building? So there was a group of teachers who participated in the initial training, and the idea was then they would be rolled out by them as in the buildings. And so what's that process going to look like as this year unfolds? And also, is it, like when is this PD happening, and how are more teachers going to be brought on board?
So so all four of our principals, Tim Kinney, Mike Joint, Tammy Roscoe, and Nate Schultz, along with the members from their leadership team, met last week on Thursday to do this planning around how professional development and learning would be offered on a monthly basis to get through each module. And so the plans that I've had an opportunity to review from each school essentially designates one of the professional days, which right now they look like Wednesdays, to designate one of those days per month for the module work, and then collaboration time throughout the month to support what the implementation of that could look like. So I think the collaboration piece and that collaboration time is where we're going to get where the real magic is going to happen. I think when in smaller groups and in smaller teams, when we're working through the application of those modules, I think that is where reflection and discussion can help improve practice, and it helps drive analysis of our systems. What we need to continue to build in is how to ensure that work is happening, that we're all doing that work at the same pace across our schools. So that's work that I and our incoming director for equity, when we identify who that person is, will ensure that we are all as a family of schools moving at the same pace, so that we don't have progress happening at different paces, and so that we can learn with and from each other along the way.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I just had a question. Sam, I think you are familiar with some of the other districts have been through this process, and I wondered if you could speak to just the ways that the successful ones have stayed on track, to Hillary's point, and overcome the expected resistance that you described.
Mm-hmm. The Middleton Cross Plains district is probably the one that gets the most attention for the application of their ICS work when suburban schools are talking about it, because it's similarly situated to ours, and as its diversity is increasing, the school board, the superintendent, and the majority of teacher leaders have all made a commitment to the ICS work and have been trained. And so it's through the critical mass building of the leadership of the district that they've been able to implement each of the modules and each of the concepts from the modules as they're designed in the chronological sequence. And in addition to that, the community is engaged in that work. And so one of the pieces that I think will be extremely important for us to learn from what the Middleton Cross Plains district has done is to engage our community, because we know that the outcomes and results of our systems within our school are also a nod at it's a playing out of what our community values and what's important in our community, or what our community is aware of. And so as we have, I think, very admirable values as a community, we also have to acknowledge that there are implications for what that means for maintaining a status quo or maintaining an approach that may not be working for all students or that is excluding students. And so being able to bring the community into spaces to be a part of this learning and to be a part of this process, that level of convergence, that level of cooperation, I think is going to be critical. Most districts don't do that. And I think this is where we see the work get slowed down, is when we appear to be working at cross purposes with, when districts are working at cross purposes with the community. And it's not because the community doesn't want to do the work, it's that they haven't had the same context and space to grapple with the information in the same ways that the administration and teachers have. And so I'd like to think through just collectively and creatively ways that we can engage our students and our parents in the work that we're doing, so that truly as a community, we're on the same page with this.
Thanks.
Thank you.
What you just said, Sam, too. Sorry, guys. what you just said too was consistent with what we heard at the end of the workshops too, right? With the community, was we needed to find those ways to creatively engage them. So.
Yep. And that was, you know, in Dr. Capper's work as she concluded the workshop. I mean, her philosophy has evolved into more of a community, a collaborative process. You know, traditionally, much of the work that ICS talks about is transforming a system from within the system. But I think that we also transform systems with transparency and accountability from outside of the system, and that would be from our community and our stakeholders. And so I think the revelation and the development of that work, and I think as a district, we can contribute to the research that maybe there's some gaps there around how community engagement and how partnerships with parents and students accelerates and sustains this work. There is not a lot of information in the ICS work around how that's been successful. So I think we're uniquely situated, both in size and history of engagement with our community, to be able to be a case study or an example for the successes that come with a community being on board in this process.
Have you already, or do you think there's an opportunity to reach out first to the people who are present at the strategic planning meetings, like not the people who work in the district who obviously know what's going on, but just to let them know, like, here's where we are, here's what we're doing in response to what you decided?
Yeah, that's actually, so we haven't done that yet, but that's actually what I'm thinking makes the most sense to sustain the engagement of that group. One of the things that we heard pretty loud and clear at the end of our strategic planning work was that there was an interest in continuing those meetings and continuing that opportunity. And I think as great as Dr. Monique Liston is, and we really appreciate her leadership, as we pivot to more systems transformation, I think there's opportunities for members from within our district to now lead this work with our communities, teachers and counselors and even board members to be facilitators of this work. And part of the reason why we went through the Institute training as a leadership team first is so that we can, in fact, share this information in other spaces. And so I think it truly creates an opportunity for our community to see us as leaders of this work, instead of the need to bring in outside expertise around equity work. And so what I'd like to do moving forward is create those opportunities virtually and then eventually even in person for us to continue to meet on a schedule and rhythmic basis with our community, so that they also are in tune with our modules as we go through them.
Great.
Thank you for that question.
So Sam, when, or maybe this is for you and Brian, like when should we expect to see kind of updates on what's happening with the ICS work and equity work?
I mean, I'd be prepared to share an update. I defer to Brian, to Dr. Davis to confirm this. I'd be prepared to share monthly updates because our schools are doing this work on a monthly basis. And as each module is completed and we move further into our work, I think it's also an opportunity for our community to know what's happening. And so if there's a way to communicate that, at least on a monthly basis, that allows our community to be aware. I'd also think that dedicating some space on our district webpage to keep the community updated. So if that update isn't appropriate necessarily in the board space, but if there's maybe another place where we can provide more detail and context, doing so through our webpage, our district webpage, I think would be helpful.
I think monthly makes sense from, I think, a board perspective.
Yeah, and I think we can also time when we're thinking about our mid-year review of our strategic plan that we do usually in end of January, February. That would be a good time to be able to have, I think, each building's leadership teams be able to be available to talk through, in person, have some dialogue around the work that's being done. And that we might be able to, if we can time it right, maybe piggyback on a community training that we get kicked off. So maybe that could be a mid-year review and a kickoff of our community ICS training in some way, to be able to piggyback those two. I think might be just a different way to engage.
Great, thank you. Any further questions? No, thanks, Sam.
Thank you all.
And then next up is an update on the 2020-2021 reopening plan. So again, Brian provided an executive summary. Brian, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, just would take any questions that are out there related to the plan. We had our weekly update with staff today, so I had an opportunity to touch base with staff on the goals and our objectives and action steps that are outlined in the email that was sent last Thursday. I had a good discussion related to each building's work and kind of what the next steps are. So each building's working hard and to make sure that we're ready to go on September 8th. So, but I'll take any questions on the materials that were posted.
Quick question just on the PD that we were just talking about and everything in this planned in August. Is that going to be done virtually or like distance with masks in person?
Yeah, so most of it will be done virtually. So, you know, we're really going to be careful about doing any PD that would, you know, involve, you know, maybe more, again, thinking about groups of 5, trying to keep our classrooms in those types of spaces. We might be able to do some of that department work, but when we'd be talking about like staff meetings, like this training would be generally, or anything district-wide, we'd be doing all of that virtually.
Brian, can I ask about the childcare that's being worked on, just given the importance of this issue for families? Yeah. And I know when the memo had said that details are being worked out and just the information will be coming in the next couple of weeks. But if you're a parent who needs that childcare sooner rather than later would be, I think, the goal. So do you know when that information would be coming?
So I've got a meeting tomorrow with Milestones and then following up with Milestones again on Friday and the principals. So I'm hopeful that we can get something out by the end of this week on Friday to be able to. One of the things we're just nailing down is our just capacity to make sure that we're really clear on our space. And as you heard tonight, as we have some construction going on, we just want to finalize that before we would send out any any requests for signing up. So we just need to fine tune that. Also been scouring the village to see what other spaces we can use that would work for these purposes. So yeah, so we've had some really good conversations with Milestone staff regarding partnerships, which I think will serve us really well. And then we also made a commitment to district staffs, students, whether they're in the district or outside of the district, to make sure that thinking about them as essential workers, that we can help support their families also.
And I do appreciate that, and I do want to thank Milestones and Jody and Megan and Justin for all the work that they've done on this. I have to say I worry a little bit that 120 spots for the K4 through 6 is not it's good and it's also not a lot. So how, assuming the need is greater than that those 120 spots for that age group, how is a decision going to be made as to who gets it? I guess, yes. or that I assume will be in the information that's forthcoming. But I just I worry that we might have more of a need than we can accommodate.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. There's other districts that are following this type of model. So we're also, and Milestones is working across the North Shore. So we're working with them on some definitions that they have and some prioritization processes that they've used. But also obviously we want an equitable way to be able to provide these offerings. But we're also trying to put the word out through the Shorewood Community Network and anybody that needs child care support, and because this really is a village effort to be able to make sure that our students have spaces that are safe and that have enough Wi-Fi to be functional in our new virtual space. So we'll again just try to get that information out by the end of the day on Friday, and monitor where we're at, and it's likely just going to continue to be a work in progress to be able to offer that. But we at least want to get something set up initially for parents. And again, this would be for people that really would fall within either essential services or really don't have any other options. for child supervision during the school day.
So the clarity of how those decisions will be made will be in the communication that you're sending out, right?
Yes, yeah, as well. Yes, along with just the capacity and locations and kind of how we also want to include what the safety protocols are, because I know that's on top of everybody's mind when they're looking at what their potential options are for child supervision. So that's something we'll work closely with Milestones on as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Brian, can I ask if I'm a parent, when I'm going to get more information about like schedules and what all of those things are going to look like? I mean, I think it feels very vague at this point.
Yeah, so that's something again that principals and staff are working through. So I'm hopeful by the time you get to the end of probably, well, maybe mid next week or it's getting late, and we know that. But this is kind of how this work is. And again, we're just trying to really nail down and make sure we get at least our best foot forward. And that's a lot of what staff have been working through in some of the work group meetings and principals have been doing collaboratively at the elementary schools and with the SIS and SHS to be able to develop those schedules and then work with their office staff to be able to get that information out and how we're going to get technology accessible and those types of things. So I would expect next week we'd start to have some, we'll need some announcements out to make sure that people know kind of what our process is going to be.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the other piece is, there's a lot in here about like action steps, creating opportunities for personal connection. I think if I'm a parent, I don't know what that means, right? Like, what are you going to do? I mean, we all as board members heard from parents, from students, from community members saying their student was really lost, right? And I know that that was emergency learning and this is, virtual learning, but the need for a personal connection was like one of the most clear things that I heard in the last 8 weeks. And I feel like this sentence is doesn't tell me anything about how that's going to happen.
Sure.
Yeah. And I don't know if we know, like, how are people going to create opportunities for personal connections?
Well, and that's again a lot of the dialogue that that teachers are having now to be able to what space that they're going to feel comfortable working from, and then from that space, how can they engage engage kids either virtually or face to face, either individually or in small groups. So that depending on their grade level and their positions, that's something that they'll need to communicate as they get their class rosters and start making that really clear in their initial communications with parents.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from my perspective, like I think there should be, as a parent, I'd want to know that there are minimum things that all teachers are doing, so that the same kinds of activities and connections and engagement are happening across the district. I think I'm worried about my neighbor having a very different experience than the person across the street from them, because we heard about that as well in March through June, about people feeling like, I don't understand why, and I don't know if we have a reason why it would be so different either. So to have an ability to say like every student is going to get these 5 touch points,
sure,
or whatever they are, like I think it would be helpful for parents to from a parent perspective to know that. I also don't want to, as a board member, wait until somebody comes to a board meeting and says these things haven't happened for us to be like, oh, well, I didn't even know that. Like I want there to be some sort of accountability that's set up so that people know, like, again, like this is who you talk to if it's not working for your kid or whatever.
Sure.
I mean, I guess in the end, like I feel like these action steps, to Sam's point, like it feels very much like we heard, this is like, feels to me like status quo. And I'm worried about that given how much we've talked about equity and the fact that this feels like these are things that we will probably do. But if you're a student who struggled or you're marginalized in any way, like it's not obvious that there's going to be concerted effort to make this year different for you and different from what it's been. And I think it's hard for me as a board member to have sat through some really challenging board meetings where students have been really honest about how this has been for them, and for this then to not address that. So I think, I mean, I guess from my perspective, I want to see specific equity related, and it is not even equity, just like how we're going to make sure that those students who we know have been marginalized before the pandemic and during the pandemic, and those students who whose parents have just told us, like Pablo and I talked to parents yesterday, that their needs were not met, that we have ways to make sure that those things are addressed, that there's accountability to those, and that you know, that we can say to parents, like, these are the things that we put in place. So I understand that this was like kind of the beginning of that, but I hope that parents are able to access like that level of detail so that they understand what they can look forward to, and then understand, like, if that's not happening, what the, you know, like where they go for help to, like, you know, ensure that their student is getting what they need.
Sure. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think it'll also be important for us to be explicit about what those expectations are as we're looking at supporting staff in order to get there. And so what are we monitoring on a regular basis related to student engagement, academic growth, which we've committed to at least 1 year as a full growth, and as we're looking at social emotional, you know, wellness, mental health, like those types of things. So those are indicators that I know I've talked to Sam about, you know, from a district standpoint, to make sure that we have, you know, measures that all staff will be collecting, and that he'll be able to report out on, you know, frequently as we're going throughout this process. Because we want to make sure as we're going week to week, and certainly as we look at, you know, our quarters, to be able to make some assessments of what's working and what's not, and then be able to communicate both, but especially, you know, what's working, to be able to support staff in making moves if things aren't working and if we're falling up short. And again, we can predictably, when we look at our data, you know, we've got a pretty good prediction about how that's going to fall. So being proactive now in our planning processes between now and September 8th is really important. So that's something that Sam and Mickey are developing, and making sure that we're engaging students at a whole nother level than we were in the spring.
Hey, Brian, to follow on that, isn't that part of, and is Julie still on? Because is that part of what they're going to be starting to do tomorrow? I think they're meeting tomorrow, right, with her parents? Because that's one of the concerns that I had too, was we know that there's a very focused team that handles all different kinds of situations that individual children are in, right? And that's the core of what they do, but it also takes the individual classroom teachers to be a part of that plan as well. So I'm assuming that all goes into it, the planning and trying to figure out what, you know, who's going to have to do what, right?
Yeah, I would say there's multiple levels of that. Julie, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, from a special education standpoint, and students with Section 504 plans as well, we're going to have case managers reaching out to the families and talking specifically about how the students did in their virtual learning with the school closure, and then what we would want to look for in this upcoming year to get started. So essentially, having those personalized conversations is going to be very important in that process. As far as collaboration, there's a very high need for collaboration with the general education teachers in this process, because as we develop programs, essentially they're IEP team programs. So essentially every student has their own individualized plan, and a team puts that together. So there will be a need for a lot of collaboration in this process, but we are going to start with our special education staff reaching out to the families to kind of receive some information from them individually about how their experience was and what we are looking at doing moving forward to be able to meet the needs of all the students who have different types of learning needs.
Thank you.
I was just going to echo. I definitely heard the same things and had some of the same reactions that Parry did about parents' frustrations with the limitations of emergency learning. So definitely think consistent expectations will be important. To the degree that we've made room for flexibility for teachers, I think, in my mind, some of those expectations still can be met virtually, even if they're a lot harder. Some, not all, right? Like we know that there's some students who just simply need like physical contact, somebody with them supporting them. But we know, some teachers are not going to feel comfortable back in the classroom, but also there's also a probability that some teachers will be sent back home to quarantine if they've got either a community exposure or in building exposure. So it feels like we should just be ready to really, again, since we know which students are likely to be disadvantaged if their teacher has to be at home, to really think through like how we mitigate the negatives there and try to just deliver something better than we did in the spring. So I mean, it sounds like you're on that track. I just want to be clear. I understand that many students are need in-person learning. It's also just not ideal for almost anyone. So understanding that, I think it's important not to just think of it as impossible. That I think we can still deliver really great instruction virtually. It's doable and with an equity lens. So I hope we can do that. It sounds like you're doing the right things to prepare for that in terms of meeting one-on-one with students. So that's and their families, and that's great.
Other questions or comments? So Brian, just to like reiterate, we'll be getting parents will start hearing from principals soon, in a couple weeks, before September 8th.
Yeah, definitely before September 8th. Yeah, I would shoot for mid next week as we would look at starting to get those communications out, related to how school's going to look, schedules, supply lists, a lot of those things that are just, it's a brand new space for everyone. So I think I think our plan has positioned ourselves well to be successful. I was on a call with some of my superintendent colleagues who are starting face-to-face, and they're sweating right now because of some outbreaks in their community and trying to figure out how and when to pivot. So I just appreciate, the leadership of the board and the work group to get us to this place that I think is going to be successful. And now, we're working on the operational pieces, and we'll be communicating those out, and that's exactly where we need to be. So I appreciate that.
And then I just have one last thing. I know we talked about this actually, I don't know, maybe in April, but we have 2 new principals at the elementaries that have not met, any of the families. Well, maybe Nate has. And then, we have students moving into new buildings potentially, right? High school or SIS, maybe the big building is there any way, I know we've done some, I guess I just want to throw this out there. I know we've done some virtual orientations, but I do think if there is possibilities for students to walk around and see the building, meet the, visually, like maybe wave to the principal from far away or something, I think it would be really appreciated. Because I think it's really difficult. Again, those connections have been, I mean, especially if you've never met these people before, like I think it's difficult to make those connections. So I don't know what we could do in those situations, but if there's opportunities, I think it would be things I think parents and students would really appreciate it. So
sure, yeah, that makes sense. I'll touch base with Nate and Tammy about that and get something scheduled early on.
Might not hurt for us to get a tour too.
Yeah, probably.
I'm so sorry. I was looking back at my notes and realized I forgot a question I had. Just thinking about the access to the buildings that we heard about from Mike. Is that delay and the issues with like ADA entrances, was that built into the timing of bringing of the sort of phased in-person interaction that is in the update that you gave us? in other words, like it describes, starting to have meetings with students at X date and then expanding that.
Yeah, that'll be naturally part of our process. We'll have to, again, with the alternative entrances and exits, we have to be able to work that into our plan. But accessibility is certainly a priority for us as we're moving forward. So, and again, as we looked at the phasing, the volume of kids that we anticipate coming into the buildings, by the time we would get to the phase 3, for example, we'll be pretty much done and on our way to be able to move into our more regular kind of entrances and exits to the front of the buildings and put that to bed. So.
Thanks.
Okay, so our next meeting is actually the annual meeting, but we probably should, plan on getting some sort of update on this maybe at that meeting as well, as part of your kind of what do you call it? The state of the district.
State of the district. Yeah, this is the state of the district. So this will probably be it. So okay. Yeah, I can certainly incorporate that in and then take questions as needed.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, public comments number 2. I'm gonna turn it over to Mickey again.
All right. Anybody that has a comment they would like to share, please unmute your phone and I will call upon you. Or unmute yourself.
Yeah, go ahead, Abby.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, Abby Fowler, 4600 North Morris Boulevard. Just a couple of random comments. One, I want to thank the school district for putting Black Lives Matter on our sign in the front of Shorewood on the light board. That's been a lot to me and my kids to drive by that and see that kind of support. So we've been out marching and that really meant a lot to me. So thank you for that. Second, when Sam was talking, I had my video on. And I don't know if you saw my son, I think probably everybody did. He was going to play with my dog and came walking back through and saw that Sam was talking and needed to hear what he was saying. And so I flipped one of my ear so he could hear what he was saying. And I want to present that to you as the reason it's so important to have representation in our schools that represent our students. He stopped because a Black man was speaking in this forum. He knew it was important to me for me to be here and have silence in the house, but he stopped and asked to hear what Sam was saying and listened to the whole thing. And so that's an example of why it's so very important for us to have Black representation in our schools and have that connection. The equity work that we have talked about for years is the talking is getting old. It is time for action. It's time for us to get on top of this. And whatever it takes, I'm here to support. I'm here to help. I'm not here to get down on anybody, but it's time. And I think we can do this. I really believe in this group of people to be able to cover that. Shifting gears again, Pablo, your proposal of a group of administrators, parents, and students meeting is wonderful, but I would make that a weekly meeting. I'm willing to make that commitment to meet weekly because months don't buy us time in this pandemic. Months mean we're losing time, we're losing education. So I think if we're gonna look at like being able, it's gonna have to be a fluid situation. Like if we're gonna look at this new, everybody looking at this new, no one's done this before. I think a weekly meeting is more important than a monthly meeting because week to week, we can make some changes, we can make some adjustments, we can do some audibles, right? So I would up that meeting point. I'm willing to join in that group. One more thing, school related, and then I'm going to shift gears and then I'll get off. I'm hoping that my kids get some face-on-face time within the school district. It does not have to be every week. It does not have to be anything scheduled, but I'd like some collaborative work, and I'd like some ability to have my kids meet face-to-face with their teachers if they are in need of help. Again, this is fluid. We're going to have to work through it. Both my kids are moving into brand new schools. One of my kids doesn't know the landscape of SIS. And so like, I want them to be able to have some of that experience. And I also want them to be able to touch base with their educators. And I think we can do that safely. And I think you all believe that as well. So I am going to now shift into fifth gear, which is totally outside of what I've just talked about. And that is, I want to just double back. A couple of months ago, during your meetings, it was brought to the public's attention that one of the village trustees, Davida Amenta, had caused damage at one of our schools, Lake Bluff, the parking ramp. And the damage, I think, was to the tune of $25,000. And I want to ensure that the school district has been made whole on that. And I don't know who can answer that, or whether I have to follow up with an email, or if someone can answer that for me tonight. But that's something that's important to me.
Thanks, Abby. I don't have the info on where we are with the damages, but I can get that to you for sure from Brian. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for all your hard work, you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, turning it back over to you, Mickey.
All right. Anybody else that has a comment, they'd like to unmute themselves. If you're on the phone, *6 and unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Amy Miller, 4458 North Larkin, also Lake Bluff. You can hear me, I presume?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I wanted to, Paru, I think that I wanted to speak to your advocacy for our students and families on what the fall will look like, and just communicate to you that that is the work that teachers are in the midst of really making sure we're doing with full intention. And I just want to share a couple of the things that those of us who are coming together on Tuesdays, and then because not everyone can be there, not everyone is there, right? It's summer, and so it's kind of a hit or miss kind of thing. For it would be helpful if everyone were there, but they're not. But here is what is happening, just a touch, a taste of it. We are going to have learning plans for all students. And so right within that plan, we are going to also address and have normed what will happen when a student, or dare I say, if a student isn't participating, and it's 3 days, right? So there we are norming the process and how we respond to that, and what we're doing in order to like build those systems. So that's one thing. A second thing is we are planning together and collaborating together in grade bands. So K4 and K5 are working together, 1st and 2nd grade, 3rd and 4th grade, 5th and 6th grade. And this is at both schools, and this is across single grade and multi-age. And so we are coming together to make sure that we can really, I think some of what personally I experienced in the spring was that sense of like urgency and emergency, and didn't really have the time or space to co-plan. And that is something we are doing with intention to make sure that we can co-serve to co-teach. And so that collaboration across grade bands is happening with intention in both of the elementaries. Our district leadership team, who all participated in the ICS training, are leading professional development at least one Wednesday a month. And we have decided that the PD on Wednesdays are going to kick off our day. And so we're going to start the day with that. So it helps set the scene and the stage and the expectation for those collaborative planning meetings that will come throughout our Wednesdays. Rather than waiting until the end of the day, we want to norm the conversations about how we serve kids, what we do to meet their needs, and again, doing that with intention. And the last thing I just wanted to mention is the instructional leadership teams at the elementary schools. Those are our teams that work closely with expeditionary learning, and they have really been very intentional about providing the support as well as guidance and structure for all of our staff to be able to meet the expectations. They're setting incredibly high expectations, so everyone feels like they have somewhere to go when they're not sure. They can turn to their colleagues because we're all working on the same thing. And in that shared responsibility, we'll be able to meet our students' needs in ways that will be very, very different than they were in the spring. So that's just a brief overview. But I do want you to know, like from a teacher's mouth, that we also have heard loud and clear, and believe me, it's something that we experienced as well. We can't do the spring again. We will not do the spring again. This will be completely and entirely different.
Thanks, Amy. I really appreciate that. And thank you for outlining those specific things. It's really helpful.
Sure. You're welcome. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. This is Tracy Clark at 4144 North Larkin Street. I would like to start, I'm going to call an audible myself, by thanking Amy Miller for her comments. I think my first question is now, why isn't Amy Miller or someone else from SEA on the agenda so that the community can hear that perspective? That is the best that I have felt from any of the updates that I've been listening to all summer. So thank you so much. As a parent of a Lakes Bluff third grader, I really appreciate that. And it kind of leads into my secondary comment about the overall responsiveness and concerns that I'm having about the conversation of the community actually now moving to social media or neighborhood conversations. It's really the first item of conversation that anyone sees is having when you see someone for the first time or you're flagging people down across the street. And I'm not sure if that's being communicated out appropriately. I have some concerns that there aren't as many people here as there have been in the past. And I think that that may be reflective of the information not being disseminated like Amy just shared. I think that would bring a lot of people some comfort, and especially around the conversations where people are deciding whether or not to what type of decisions they're making for the district and for their children in the district, and just try to find the support that they need for themselves, for their family, for their students, and to help support their students and their teachers in a collaborative environment. I think it'll be helpful for parents to be viewed as, active in the learning process. And so I just, with the timing of this being August 11th and being an educator myself, like I understand prep. And so not having information this close to the start date of a very unknown learning environment for my third grader and my 4K, which is not my area of expertise. I guess I don't understand why bulk of tonight's conversation was very strategic. It was kind of very forecasting, a year out and not dealing with, what's happening right now. And I guess I think a sense of urgency might be more beneficial to communicate out to the community so that we're coming together in this time. So I'm, just really hoping to see more specifics. And I love, again, I just want to say thank you to Amy. I love that that the teachers are taking that kind of ownership. I think that's exactly where it belongs and where it's going to best serve our students. And so I would appreciate, that type of communication to keep coming.
Thanks, Tracy. Oh, Jennifer.
Hi, I also want to echo the previous commenters' thought in terms of Amy's information that she shared with us. I think that's important information that really needs to be disseminated to all parents, that this is what the teachers are doing every week. I think a lot of us, as you said, Peru, are really hungry for what those filling in those gaps are. The plan provided a broad overview, but was really, really light on the details. Really light on the details, and most parents are trying to figure out what their kids need, what kind of arrangements they're going to make. And so I think, the information that Amy shared was really helpful. And so even if it isn't yet a specific plan, it at least gives that, even conveying essentially that summary to the district, I think would be really helpful so parents know what's being planned and that, it is really being worked on every moment. So I think, if you could summarize what Amy said, that would be really helpful to a lot of parents. I know there are parents that have decided to leave the district or are waiting to decide to register. And I also know that we don't want to lose more families. So if you could provide some ongoing communication like that, I think it would alleviate a lot of fears. So I would advocate for that, like the previous caller mentioned. I also think, as Hillary mentioned, 120 spots of childcare feels inadequate for me for the K through 6th level. I know that you're going to have to prioritize and you're going to have to make some pretty hard criteria. And I'm worried that it's going to really leave, families that are in need sort of high and dry. So I think figuring out what other options there could be for other childcare, not just the spreadsheet on the Sherwood Community Network. While I agree that that's nice that that's up there for parents who can afford it and can utilize it, I think figuring out how to match up families who have needs with families that can provide needs so that families within our district can kind of cross-pollinate and figure out, yes, I can do Tuesdays and I can do Fridays, and you could perhaps create some small groups. Granted, the large groups aren't ideal, but perhaps you can create some groups of families of 2 to 3 that don't know that they could be each other's support system, right? I know that's a difficult thing to try and figure out, but I think that's the kind of innovation that our district really needs during this time. And I know that some organizations like the PTO, for example, might be uniquely situated to sort of help facilitate something like that. So it doesn't always have to be, on the district's shoulders. So I think we need more innovation as it comes to the childcare spots beyond the 120 that the district has committed to, because I just am guessing that that's not going to be adequate. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Can I speak?
Yes, please.
Okay, this is Julie Warnke. I live on 4452 Ardmore, and almost everything I was going to say, Tracy and Jen said, which is lovely, and they said it so well. But the only other things that had I had made a little note about were, I don't know if it's premature. I guess I know that it probably is premature to discuss enrollment numbers, but I too have heard so many comments about, where people aren't sure if they're going to enroll and they're waiting to find out what school will look like, what the childcare will look like,
what the plus part of the virtual plus will look like in terms of, you know, contact between students and teachers at the school. Will there be small groups? And so I just feel like it is really important to, you know, get that communication out there in as specific of a form as possible so that parents can make those decisions, because the longer that goes on, the level of angst in those individuals, and then also individuals who maybe have already made a plan or already have their, you know, their decision just kind of, I'm one of those people, you know, there's a lot of angst that goes along with like realizing what is going on in all the homes in this community and how much stress is here and what that might mean for enrollment numbers and what that might mean for school in the future here in Shorewood and the quality of education that our children will receive. So I think sooner rather than later would be great with communication.
Thanks, Julie. Appreciate your comments.
All right, anyone else that has a comment, please unmute yourself. I see a caller, last two digits, 89, has something they'd like to say.
That was me. I already spoke, but thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Just unmute yourself and press *6.
Thanks, Mickey. There'll be one more opportunity for public comment. So if you have one, we can there'll still be time. Okay, so some reports from the board that have been, we've managed to push back a couple of times now, so I'm glad we're getting to it, for board governance. So the first one on here is a WASB resolution. I didn't know, I mean, I had this on there originally because I didn't know if we wanted to write one. We're now co-signing on 3 others. I don't know if people have had the time to think through if they wanted one as well. Do one. So we don't need to. It was just an idea I had on there, kind of as a holding spot.
I wanted to think of something, but I definitely don't have the capacity at the moment.
I know, like there's a lot going on right now, so I know. So that's fine. I'll just, you know, remind ourselves it needs to be voted on by September, I think the middle of September. So we just always need to at least be thinking about it. If you guys hear of anything else that somebody else is doing, we also can always ask to co-sign another one as well.
Which we did tonight.
Which we did tonight, right? Yep. Okay, so, and then some updates from meetings that have happened over the last few weeks. So HRC update from Clark.
Sure. So the last time the HRC actually met was for the Shorewood Speaks candid conversations on progress towards racial equity, and that was right before our last board meeting. Since then, their subcommittees have had gotten together and made lists of recommendations, whether it's the data subcommittee or the policy subcommittee, and they'll be discussing those at the next HRC meeting, which is this Thursday. So I'll probably have more details to report on the next update. And I also wanted to, I think I mentioned this before, but I'm not sure, so I'll make sure I do it again. But they do have 2 new student representatives on the HRC, Alicia Obiakor and Molly Fox-Kincaid. Oh, and one last thing, if for folks who missed that discussion, you can, I think there's a link in the board materials tonight, but there's also a link in the village manager's memo, I believe from July 16th, and you can listen to that on a YouTube recording. What's up?
Clark, can I ask a question? I wasn't able to make that meeting.
Yes.
What were the like action steps that were coming out of it?
So what they did was after the discussions, the HRC members were the ones responsible for taking notes, and then based on the requests and actions that they heard during that discussion, they were to come together with what do they think are some of the things that we should be doing as a community to help address those concerns that we heard from various speakers. And then those recommendations or suggestions are going to be discussed the next one so that they can outline certain action items. So there will be a suggestion, for example, one of the suggestions for the policy is potentially to ask us to evaluate our error mark relationship. I don't know what that means specifically yet, but that is one of the things that was suggested as an action item based on previous behaviors or whatever the case may be. I'm just not familiar with the error marks, the situation on that, but that's one of the things that will be discussed on Thursday.
And so just to understand, like the subcommittee then makes a recommendation, and then like that sounds like a committee that they're going to ask us to do something about that.
That would be something that they would recommend. So the way I understood it would be they would recommend having a discussion with us to consider doing that and see whether that's even something that we would consider, right? Okay. So it's not an action item that committee can take, but these are suggestions that they see around their committee, and that's just the example I was using.
Okay, I see.
Those are suggestions that they see around the community that they look. For example, another one would be creating a community police monitoring commission, right? And making sure that that goes forward, and making sure that they adopt all of the I'm drawing a blank on it. It's the 8. Shoot, somebody help me out here. The 8 tenets that we want to all communities to.
The defund the police one?
It's related to that, but it's more of we will commit to not having the police not being able to engage in specific behaviors and using specific tactics, right?
Right. Okay. I just was curious about, like, since I wasn't able to make that meeting, what the next steps were. So I appreciate that. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Up next, Hillary was going to give us an update on the Joint Review Board meeting that she attended.
So the attachment is the report that we approved, the report on the TIF districts. And so I put that up there for your information, mainly because as a taxing entity, we have a role in this annual Joint Review Board vote. This is a statutory requirement that all of the taxing entities get together annually for this report from the village's Mr. Emanuelson, the budget director. And the vote that we take in that meeting is basically just to accept the report. And so I share this as we are all financial stewards. This is more for your information than anything. I've attended as a representative for the district last year and this year, and I've chaired the board meeting the last 2 years. So for my understanding is for the term that I hold in being on the school board, I will continue to do that for the remainder of the time. So it's more of just an FYI. I'm happy to answer questions, but really it's just for you all to see the reports as I saw them in this meeting.
Thanks, Hillary. Any questions?
Hillary, are there important sort of financial takeaways that we should be aware of in terms of like how the TIF districts are performing? And I know their closing dates are all far off, but what that will mean for us and all.
Yeah, they are. And at a very 30,000-foot level, I'll say the reports were all positive. And Mr. Emanuelson indicated that all the TIF districts are doing well and are in good financial health. My concern was any pandemic sort of negative repercussions, but he seemed to be confident that we were in good shape in the village for weathering sort of this storm. And so I would just say from a very, very 30,000-foot level, that the districts are in good health.
Thanks.
Thanks, Hillary. So I'm not sure, I don't know, Clark is not on right now. So what I think the two of us wanted to talk about with the assessment workshop we went to was really, so this is like 100-page, PowerPoint. So obviously I don't want to go through all that right now, but I do think one of the things that came out of it for me, and something that I think we could talk about at our next workshop looking at results, is that being more specific, or more, I guess, understanding better what we're trying to measure, and then making sure we're finding the right tools to do that, and then thinking about the limitations for some of the tools that we currently use. So, like, what can we really get out of something like the Ford exam? And yes, we have to do the Ford exam, but then what are the real indicators that we want to know around growth? And how to, I think the other piece for me was like how to visualize that so that people understand, both the parents and administrators and board members, what we're looking at, so that we have a better, I think, understanding of, like, are we making improvements or not, and what's, what those benchmarks are. I don't remember if it's in this one, but I can share with you guys. There was one other presentation packet which had, the presenter for this, Ginger, had like a lot of other resources for things like assessments around wellness, around civic engagement, around citizenship. So I thought that would be also something we might want to look at, since we don't have, like, we use the Ford exam and maybe MAPS testing and grades for some of this, but we've struggled, I think, to think through like what those other assessment tools might be. So what I could do, and Clark, you can, when I'm done, add anything else, is pull together all that and have us hopefully pull it together in like a more manageable format for our meeting next Wednesday. And then we can kind of start, you guys can kind of start looking through. It's, you would probably want to look at it yourself first and kind of just see what the options are. And then we can come together as a group and talk about it. Clark, would you want to add anything else?
I just echo the two things that you mentioned. The really eye-opening piece for me was getting a better understanding how some of that data is pulled together, because depending on how we present it and measure it, people could be making assumptions that are completely off, or we didn't realize we thought we would be measuring in one way, when actually what we're presenting is something that's not telling the whole picture. Or the way that it's measured from grade to grade differs. So I thought that was pretty helpful. The other thing too was, I think there was a part where she used us as an example. Is that right, Rue, for some of our
yeah, for the indicators, yeah.
For the indicators. And all I remember thinking was, yeah, we got to work on that one. So I think it is something we should bring back to the group and talk about, really challenging some of those indicators again to say, well, what do those words that we're using actually really mean? And are we measuring the things that we're measuring? We've talked about that in some respect, but some of it from an outside person looking in, it was more, I guess, more in my face. So it was kind of nice to hear.
Yeah, and I guess for me, like, I think for better or for worse, like, now that we're using different kinds of assessment tools kind of as a district anyway, and not having the opportunity to look at other ones, like, it kind of I think frees us to be more like creative potentially, or just like, you know, let go of some of the things that we've always done. So
Right.
I think that would be helpful. Okay, so I'll make sure I get all that ready for you guys for next week. Okay, so I think there were 3 SWASA meetings that we have updates on.
Yeah, so the most recent one was this morning. We tabled the one from July 14th. I've got the notes up in the board books. But basically, we've met in 2 different groups. One has been with the superintendents and school board members and some business managers. But then we also had, I think it was last week, we had our meeting with just board members, which is really helpful for board members to come together from all over southeastern Wisconsin and talk about issues. Guess which ones? Legislative advocacy and reopening, and seeing what our partners are doing, what challenges they're facing. I just want to reiterate how happy I am to live in this community and have like the level of commitment and engagement from a very thoughtful and progressive populace. One of the questions that was asked by one of our peer districts this morning of we've been meeting now twice with 2 pediatricians from Children's Hospitals, Dr. Gutzeit and Dr. Carey, who've been very helpful in kind of helping answer questions. But one of the questions they were asked was, you know, how do you deal with the community that thinks COVID's a hoax? All I could do was you know, smile at Clark going, we don't deal with these questions. Like, we're on a whole, you know, we've got very, very different questions going on here. So a lot of things from the federal level, most recently, and I alluded to this in my comments earlier, from the legislative level, Robin Vos, Scott Fitzgerald, and I want to say like 30 some other members of the GOP Assembly and Senate wrote quite a threatening letter to superintendents. Not quite sure, but I believe it could have been to all 420 districts in the state. Kind of strong arming districts to reopen and do things the way that they see fit, which is very much against the whole notion of local control, which they stand by in other cases. That was strongly refuted by a statement that the Wisconsin Association of School District Administrators put out. And Brian, I don't even know if you got the letter. I did hear some superintendents just tossed it in the garbage because it was so offensive.
I did not receive one, but
yeah, they
I would likely do the same.
Yeah, waste time with Shorewood, but a lot of our peer districts got it, and it was concerning because this is a body that controls, you know, not just 1/3, more than 1/3, but a significant amount of our funding. So that's something on the radar. You know, there's a lot of schools that are, you know, one of the things we've talked about is pushing that third Friday seat count back. I know Amy lobbied and Amy Miller met with the governor on Monday to talk about that. One of the concerns, and in all reality, as much as I hope that our neighbors that are opening schools and the private schools in the neighborhood that are going to reopen, and I hope they stay open and I hope nobody gets sick, but if it's anything like everywhere else, one of the examples that was shared was, you know, the South, southern states that have reopened schools in late July, and now they're seeing a huge spike in COVID cases among children. And I say that because my own prediction is that our neighbors that are opening are probably going to have to close down. That's why I'm glad we're going the route we're going to, and listening to our teacher talk about the reopening plans and what teachers are doing to engage made me very excited, because the concern that our peers have, they're crossing their fingers very tightly, hoping they don't have to shut down, because if they do have to shut down, it's probably going to look a little bit more like spring did than what we're going to be looking forward to in the fall. I say that for a couple reasons. One, I think we made the correct decision, as difficult as it was, and secondly, I I hope folks think long and hard before they decide to leave places like, you know, the Shorewoods and other places, the Nicolay High School, that have decided to go this route. And I hope they don't have to come back, but I'm betting. That's my thought. Those were some of the discussions. So you can read the notes. And I think I alluded real quickly, just the spike in cases in the South that Doctors Carey and Gutzeit shared. There's from March until now, 25% of the cases of children infected with COVID all happened in the last couple of weeks. And what else happened in the last couple of weeks? I'm not talking about Sturgis. That wasn't in the South. I'm talking about schools reopening in southern states. So I think there's lessons to be learned. So kudos to us for the path we're on. We still have more to do, but Clark, you were part of the meeting this morning. Do you have anything you want to add?
You'd covered most of it. The only other thing I would add, I guess, is that we all know this, but it probably doesn't hurt to remind ourselves that this is constantly changing, and that part of the frustrations that we're dealing with is the advice and the unknowns always change too, right? So we had an example this morning on the call where somebody asked about the exposure time that they're recommending is a key indicator of the probability of contracting COVID goes up if you have 15 minutes or more time with a positive case. And somebody asked a question, what if that was cumulative over a 24-hour period, or if that was sustained in one contact? And one of the doctors answered, no, that's sustained in one contact. And I said, wait a second, that's not what we've been told. We've been told that it's 24 hours, it's 15 minutes cumulative over about a 24-hour period. And he clarified and said, yes, that is, because that's what's coming from the state. And he said, yes, that's out there too, but this is our recommendation coming from Children's Hospital. So we're going to continue to hear conflicting advice depending on what things are happening day to day and week to week, and what different people believe is going to be the answer. So I just thought we should continue to acknowledge that, because we're going to have to make decisions based on the information you have in front of you at the time.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would add as somebody who goes to the ones with the school board members is that even no matter what plan they're doing, they're doing what they think is best for their community, and everybody is super stressed out. And, it's, the hardest thing they've done in a really long time, maybe. And so I guess we're all kind of maybe trying different things, but all with the intention to, have the best year for students. So, I think, and I guess we get to I appreciate the ability to learn from each other. So, I think we'll see what happens. But anyway, thanks both of you for your updates. Emily, did you have anything from Sherwood moving forward? Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. I was just looking to make sure that we hadn't had a meeting, but I think July 13th was the last meeting. There were a couple of updates there. I think probably the most significant for this group is they noted that they had sent a letter to the district, to I think the board and to the superintendent, signed by the board of Sherwood moving forward, recommending that To Kill a Mockingbird not be part of the 9th grade standard curriculum. And not that we ban it, but not to have a prominent place in the standard English curriculum. That was one point of review. There was a review of some conversations with the police department, and Sam Coleman is working with Aaron Schetz on some dialogue with the police department, you know, around issues that they've covered before around racial profiling, and systems that you know, uphold fear and racism in our community. Then we also, I gave a little bit of an update to the Shore Moving Forward group about the ICS work, the equity framework, and just kind of teased to the idea that they would be hearing more in the future. Trying to see if there was anything else. They set a goal. So they're launching a fundraising campaign, and now are officially a 501c3. So they have a fundraising goal of $15,000 in their first fiscal year. Yeah, I mean, lots of people are kind of tuning into Shore Moving Forward, so it's a good thing. I think they'll be a really good group to, you know, stay engaged with the ICS group. So
Great, thank you.
Hey, Paru, and board, just to clarify, I was tongue-tied earlier when I was trying to give you an example of one of the suggestions coming out of the HRC policy committee was suggesting. It's called the 8 Can't Wait campaign.
Oh yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
I knew what it was about. I couldn't remember all the details.
Yeah, I just couldn't remember. I was totally tongue-tied. My apologies.
No worries. No worries. Okay. So review of to-do items. I'm going to turn it over to you, Brian, first.
Yes. So we are going to reopen schools. So the next steps for that are going to be communications, heavy communications, primarily coming from the district level, but also specifically working with principals and teachers to make sure that we're getting those communications out as soon as possible on the details. Again, to some of the comments tonight, just relating to parents' needs for some of those details and reassurances of what school is going to look like. So I'll work with our admin team on getting a plan for that and getting those communications out promptly.
If I could suggest that, you know, we pull in, especially the testimony we heard from Amy, that inspires a lot of, you know, confidence in parents. Not necessarily that we're out here marketing, but, you know, so people hear what boots on the ground are doing. If we can find a way to channel that energy, that would be great. I've
already texted her a copy of that, so it's in motion.
Okay, and then for me, I'm going to update the annual work plan. I'm going to get materials together for our meeting next week on results policies, and I will follow up with Brian on where we are with getting reimbursed for the Trustee Amenta's accident at Lake Bluff. And Brian, can you add to yours that you're going to touch base with Mike Huffman to get a written copy of those, what did he call them? Potential cost issue log?
Oh, the PCIs, yeah.
Yeah, that he talked about?
Yeah.
I think that was it. So future agenda items, I just want to remind everybody that, oh, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. One of the things that we had talked about was that I was going to develop something to bring up at our next, so get that on the agenda. It'll probably be the September meeting on legislative advocacy, so some kind of task force, work group, ad hoc group for the board. So to-do list.
Okay.
Along
and
those
then
same
also, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Along those same lines, I said this by email, but I am happy to try and develop like a draft plan for getting our new student rep appointed, and then I could bring that either to our workshop or to our next meeting, or whatever you think is good.
Yeah, if you have it, then just bring it to that, I think.
Okay.
I was just going to say that our next meeting is the annual meeting. We are going to have a closed meeting at the end of that to discuss, we need to get the seclusion and restraint report from Julie, and that's a required like state statute type thing. So we'll do that at the end of that meeting. But otherwise, everything else will be moved to then the September, I don't know the date of our September meeting, but the first meeting in September. So is there any other future agenda items that people would like me to add?
I'd like to, I don't know if it needs to be in the first meeting in September, but the district report out on the district concern line on the website. We haven't heard from that in a while.
Sorry, the concern
you know
web
how
portal?
we were getting
Portal.
Yeah, sorry.
The web portal? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll put it on at least one of the ones in September. Okay.
Cool.
I'm sure other things will come up before now and then, but yeah, go ahead.
Yep.
Well, this is sort of a question, I think, for Brian, is like when we might have a sense of enrollment enough to get an update and hear next steps, just to get a sense of what enrollment looks like for this fall, and or how many withdrawals we've had, or vice versa.
Yep. Yeah. So I mean, that'll be part of the annual meeting presentation. So you'll hear a little bit of it there, and then we can go through details in September if you want to have follow up from there. But that's always kind of part of our annual meeting projection, because that's what we're looking at our aid for. So.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to turn over to Mickey one more time for public comments number 3.
All right. Anyone who has something they would like to ask or mention, please unmute your phone. Let's start. We have a couple here. Last 2 digits, 06. 06.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Hi. It's Kim Robinson calling from 4427 North Farwell. Just sort of piggybacking on some of the comments that were made during the last public comment period. Perhaps the district would consider a town hall meeting of some sort to go over the plan for what this school year will look like once it's vetted out a bit more. Certainly, Amy's comments today were quite helpful to give parents a sense of what's been moving forward. But perhaps once it's shared, an opportunity for parents to ask questions about it, more details about the plus, about what that means and how it's going to be implemented, opportunities for how you go about accessing additional assistance for your child, etc. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thanks, Kim. That's a great idea.
All right. I see we have a person, face-to-face person, Jim. Would you like to, Jim Arndorfer?
Yeah, hi. Jim Arndorfer, 2524 East Shore Boulevard. Just a few things. First off, I just, on a personal note, at my employer, I've been spending hundreds of hours since February helping us navigate our way through dealing with the coronavirus pandemic on a variety of levels with our customers, with our employees. So it's not easy, and I appreciate all the hard work everyone here from the district to the teachers to the board. Everybody on down is putting into this. It's not easy, and I know you're looking for the best possible outcome here. And as a parent with 2 students in the district, I appreciate that. Second, I'm very grateful that the district chose to go with Virtual Plus. Again, just based on everything I've seen in my work, I don't see a happy outcome for districts that are going to be pursuing either everyone, having all kids in or going to a hybrid model. So I think you all took the right course. I think that showed great wisdom and great respect for our teachers and our students. And I just want to applaud you for that. And, finally, I would echo what some people have said regarding, just making sure the communication is as good as it can be during this time. People are on edge right now, a lot of questions, a lot of concerns, people, just trying to navigate their way through this with their families and kids. You know, it's unfortunate some things can get blown out of proportion on social media, as can happen. And, you know, it would be great if, you know, everyone could work toward the common objective together. And I think clear communication can really help with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
All right. Anybody else that I see? Abby?
You know how I like to do. I would gently suggest, and I know you guys are at your limit on what it is that you're doing, but I know you're dedicated to making this work. I would like to see one more meeting before school starts, and I would like to hear from all the principals in all of our schools. I think they should be on the agenda. I think they should speak to us. They're the ones that are going to have to manage all of our kids and the parents that are calling in with issues. And I would like to see that. It doesn't have to be long. I'm sorry, but I really think that that's an important thing to do. So that's it. I won't say anything more, I promise.
All right.
Thanks, Abby.
Anyone else? Just unmute yourself, *6. I see last two digits, 89.
Hi, this is Julie Warnke again. I remembered something else I wanted to ask about. So in the last meeting, some of the parents expressed an interest in knowing what the standard would be for deciding if it's safe to return to a hybrid format, some sort of in-class learning. And I wondered if any movement had happened in that area. And yeah, and just like, is that going to be communicated out? Because I think some people are, you know, kind of wondering like, what's going to be happening in November already, because they're trying to plan, and obviously there's so many unknowns. But even just knowing what the standard is going to be and how that decision will be made, I think would be helpful.
So, Julie, I think that that's something that the superintendents are still discussing with the North Shore Health Department. But then I think also to Pablo's comments earlier about what the Children's Hospital is saying, I think there's still a lot of kind of, it's probably within this range answers. But I think if any communication we send out will include, I think, some updates on what what we're calling the gating criteria. If we have updates on that, they are. So thank you.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
And I can just add to that quickly. The Department of Health Services is likely coming out with some guidance this week that will likely also be used. So people can look for that as part of their news releases, and we'll be incorporating that information in how we move forward too.
Great.
Brian, given the comments that we've heard this evening, can you or Peru perhaps give just a brief overview of what the annual meeting is, and also what you'll be touching on in your State of the District address? Because I know sometimes those annual meetings are not well attended, but they are an important role that the community has in voting for things that the district does. And so I think it would be helpful just to give a little explanation as to, you know, what the annual meeting is and the purpose of it.
No, it's a great idea, Hillary. Thanks. So we are going to run it as we always have, or we have, I guess, in the last few years. So it'll start with, as you mentioned, the State of the District report, essentially, that Brian gives. That outlines, in the past, it's really been a focus on the strategic plan. This year, it will be really focused on reopening schools, I think, based on what Brian just said. And then, as you know, we kind of switch gears and turn it over to an annual meeting, which is really focused on the budget. And so Roger, whose last name I'm going to forget.
Dixon.
Thank you. He told me when I met with him that this is his 40th annual meeting he's ever conducted. So yes, so he knows what he's doing. And so, you know, like the night, it's not really a budget 101, but he does, it is an opportunity for the public to learn more about the school budgeting process and what decisions kind of go into that process and look at some trend lines over time and how we're doing, and then present the budget for the next year based on, you know, projections that won't be finalized until end of September at earliest, and maybe if there's a delay in the third Friday count, later than that. And so those are the two big pieces of the annual meeting. Am I missing anything, Brian?
No, I think that's the main thing, along with the salary approvals of the school board members. So.
Right, the most important piece. I will say that, I guess, for people who are listening, and we'll start advertising this, we are going to hold it face-to-face and virtually. So face-to-face will happen at the auditorium. And I guess board members need to decide if they're going to be face-to-face or virtual. And then Mickey will have an online version that people can sign into. So, but thanks, Hillary, for asking for that.
I
Go ahead.
would then just like retract my request for, because that's the end of this month, right?
Yeah,
but
I don't think principals and everybody aren't there, so, but that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, but it'd be nice to hear from the principal.
Yeah. Thanks, Abby. Okay. Sorry. Any other public comment?
Just *6 and unmute yourself. Doesn't look like anybody else. We have one person that I think is just muted, but not. Otherwise, you're all good.
Great. Thanks, Mickey. So I am going to call that we go into recess, and we will reconvene for a board meeting debrief in a few minutes. Thanks, everyone.